Welcome back to the Netherkast. We have episode 5 this time and our very own special guest. I'm Black Cyborg, and we have with us, as always, Shadaloo.
Good day, Mortal Kombat Online, and others.
Temporary username.
What's up, MKO?
Razor's Edge.
Why did Shadaloo introduce himself with like a Vincent Price voice? What was...
Don't ever question him. That's what I've learned. He likes Ferritor's fatality for some reason. I don't know.
Fun fact,
I didn't know we were hunting the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo.
My mom actually did meet Vincent Price way back in the day. She described him as an incredibly handsome, charming man, and in completely unrelated matters, I don't really resemble my late father at all.
Well, you guys are just absolutely rude to our guest, because now it is, 50 seconds after I introduced all of you, and she had to wait, okay? It's Ice Baby from Mortal Kombat Online. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good.
Well, that's the usual. It's always just good or fine. So you fit right in.
I injected a little flavor in and you yelled at me.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm bipolar. I can't make up my mind. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. How are you guys doing? All right,
Pretty
then.
well.
That sounds...
We covered that. We're good.
We're doing excellently.
All right. You don't have to yell.
We are all well here.
Good. We are all well. This episode we're going to be covering a very controversial issue in Mortal Kombat history, and it's the MK crossovers and guest characters. So we'll be talking about MK vs. DC, the future of the franchise, and the guest characters that were in MK9, as well as the confirmed guest character to be in MKX, which obviously we don't know who that is, but there is supposed to be one in MKX, so we'll kind of give our thoughts on that as well. So we're kind of split down the middle, if I get that correct. Who's for crossovers and guest characters? I will start off by saying that I personally don't see the issue with it in the series, but I mean, I see it both ways, but at the same time, I think pro crossovers and pro guest characters does more for the series than saying that they don't belong at all. But Shadaloo, where do you stand?
I'm on the side of the fence that kind of disapproves of them, of course.
All right, Hannibal Lecter, calm down.
Yes. My viewpoint is quite simply, Clarice, that if the people are willing to pay to eat someone's liver with a nice Chianti, I don't see any reasons to stop them. But in all honesty, I guess it depends. Crossover games in and of themselves, I never particularly had anything against them. MKDC was weird, certainly. That scratched a fair number of heads, turned a fair number of heads, but I appreciate it for what it was, even if it was toned down. It's the entire notion of guest characters that, I guess, kind of bothers me. It's not so bad to me if there's just, one. Start packing on more of them, 2 on the PS3 MK9. I think I'm starting to get my goat a little bit. I guess I'm more willing to deal with that kind of thing if it's, I suppose, within the genre, within the fighting game genre even. I mean, I complain and I bitch about them, but at the end of the day, I'm going to pay money for Fulgor if he pops up from Killer Instinct.
So you're against them, but you're accepting for when you know you have no other choice.
Pretty much. It's a losing battle, money talks, and I'm sure we've all heard this, Freddy was the absolute single best-selling DLC character in MK9. Money talks, and it's something that's going to happen regardless of how much I protest, so I've given up protesting.
Did we ever get actual statistics of how much each character sold? Because I know they've said that, and I'm not discrediting it by any means, but did we ever actually see how much each sold, or was that just something they said?
It was, if I remember hearing right, someone, maybe Ed himself, actually said on Twitter that Freddy sold the most. Beyond that, I don't think we've ever actually gotten concrete figures.
Interesting. So, Temporary, where do you stand on this situation?
I guess. I mean, okay. I'm not a big fan of guest characters, but at the same time, MK9 was so many years ago now. I think my gut reaction was way more negative than my actual stance. I more didn't like them because it was more of a philosophical thing. I'm thinking Mortal Kombat is, it's an artistic presentation, and I didn't think they worked, but I don't know. I mean, if you go back to 2011 when Mortal Kombat was coming out, I think what really compounded the issue was it wasn't just a guest character. It was Kratos. And it's like you have this pale, bald, magic-using warrior next to another bald, pale, magic-using warrior. And the difference is one's in Mortal Kombat, the other's not. It felt redundant to me. I could get on board with the right guest character. Kratos was not really my thing, so I reacted very negatively at the time. I'm over it now. I used to be very militant about the issue. Now I've calmed down a lot about it because really, even though none of my views have changed, it doesn't really matter anymore. I mean, we're going to have guest characters. It's now a reality. I would even say it's a staple of the franchise. Before I was more like Leonidas. Now I'm more like Lieutenant Dan. And that's okay because, if people aren't enjoying it, I mean, that's good. It would suck if I hated guest characters and no one else enjoyed it. At least something good is coming out of it, and but overall, if I had to state a thesis, I don't like metafiction. I feel like when you combine different types of fiction, it doesn't mesh. It's distracting. I can't really suspend belief, and people will say, well, Kratos fits, because he's violent. And I'm thinking, when you combine qualities like that, it's still distracting, because you could say Dumbledore's a wizard and Gandalf is a wizard. But if you put Dumbledore in Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna be like, what's going on? I can't really immerse myself anymore. But, like I said, a lot of people are really enjoying it. People really liked Freddy. And I was more upset about Freddy than I was Kratos because it didn't even look like Robert Englund to me. But overall, I mean, all this said, when it comes down to it, I do have. If the guest character is someone I would prefer, I'm going to tailor my reaction to that. Of course, there are good and bad guest characters, despite the fact that I don't really want them on principle. But that's me, though.
Well, geez, calm down a bit. You didn't need to take all the low blow and cheap shots. Jeez.
I will not calm down. I'm very upset right now.
Yeah.
You shouldn't calm down. You go.
Whoa. I'm going to need you to stop yelling.
Use your anger.
Sir, calm down.
Makes you strong.
Let it flow through you.
Focus.
All right, well, Ice Baby, where do you stand on all of this?
I'm for it. I'm kind of like how everyone else is. If the guest character is someone I want, I'll play as him. Not necessarily all the time. I really didn't care for Kratos because he was being overused like crazy. But with Freddy, I liked him because I thought he had some very interesting moves, even though I didn't care for his story. But like how everyone else says, if the guest character is somebody that I want to see, I'll play as him more. I'll go out of my way in spending $5 on him. But if it's someone that I'm not really, I don't know or I don't really care for, I won't go out of my way and waste my money on that. But it doesn't bother me. It's just the whole thing though is that I don't like when people constantly say they're a waste of space characters or NetherRealm shouldn't waste their time making this. I feel like that's kind of not really a good argument to go against for those who are against it, but it's their opinion. But I just feel like I can use the same tactic against them and say, oh, well, Kano is a wasted spot character. So those kind of arguments kind of makes me want to defend guest characters even more. And this might be the weirdest thing ever, but I actually started liking guest characters a lot more after that whole Freddy page thread thing on Mortal Kombat Online, where it was 40 pages of nonstop insults. That made me boost me liking Freddy even more, because then everyone's like, oh, I'll just not play anyone who plays Freddy online. instant win for me, so my rank goes up. So I'm for guest characters for some of the weirdest reasons, I guess.
All right, Razor, where do you stand on all of this?
I'm split down the middle on it. I mean, for me, it really depends on who the character is and the execution. Because, like, I understand completely, like, the arguments against having a guest character, like, especially in terms of, like, the metafiction part, like Temp said, that, it's a question of, does the character fit in the Mortal Kombat universe, or does having a crossover cheapen the brand, or, like, in some way mess with the lore? And, the thing that they've been, good about, really, is that they're not in story mode. They're just sort of a fun bonus thing. And even so, like, I don't really think Kratos does fit Mortal Kombat, and maybe we can get into that a little deeper, later on, but I feel like if a character maybe comes from another fighting game, or if there's not really any sort of contradictions, because the problem with Kratos is that his story is, first of all, set in the far past, and second, all about Greek mythology, none of which exists in the Mortal Kombat universe. So, if they had maybe done something like in Soul Calibur 2, when they had Link and Spawn, they had these stories about them being, like, sucked to the Soul Calibur world from another dimension, and that, I mean, even that they're what-if stories that they don't really count, that's still something better to put in a BioWare ending than to tell me Kratos lives in the same world as Raiden and Fujin. So, it depends on how it's done to me.
Okay, so you're more of a fan of the way Soul Calibur did it than, say, MK9 with Kratos and Freddy?
I think the way they did it with Freddy was alright, because I can sort of believe he exists in that world, that there might be a dream realm, and his whole story about, dying and becoming a demon who has power there, it could actually coexist with the lore of Mortal Kombat.
Okay, interesting.
And obviously I'm being a giant nerd about that, because, as I said myself, they're not canon characters. It doesn't really matter. I just, when I read a BioWare ending, I at least want to feel some way about it that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. All right, well, touching upon what Ice Baby said, actually, when it comes to the opinion of it being a wasted space, what is everybody's thoughts on that? And I'll start with my thoughts on the argument of a character is a waste of space when it comes to a guest character automatically taking the spot of a Mortal Kombat character, thus they're a waste of space. My thoughts are that even though it's true that had that character not been developed, we probably would have gotten another Mortal Kombat character, be it good or bad, popular or not popular. In the case of MK9, I know a lot of people blame the fact that Rain didn't make it on the initial roster on the fact that they developed Kratos, so if time hadn't been wasted on him, then we would have gotten Rain. While I can't speak to the truth of that because we don't know what they actually planned for the game, but I have to think that they planned the roster well ahead of time, and they wanted Rain to be DLC. I don't buy into the idea that had they not used the resource and time on Kratos, then Rain would have automatically been in the game, because I feel like that's nothing the Mortal Kombat team or NetherRealm has said has given that any backing. In fact, I think it's been quite the opposite. I think they've stated Kratos does not... I mean, they've taken the side that Kratos is not impeding anybody else's spot on the roster. The roster is chosen for a reason, for the characters they want for story mode or for the game at launch. And something like Kratos, even though they are taking time to design him, it's just an added bonus. And yes, that does take resources and time, so it's not like it's just additional thing that they can just tack on that wouldn't have been used elsewhere. At the same time, it's specifically done for a reason, so they make the time and the effort to put Kratos in there. to serve a purpose, which is obviously marketing, but we'll get into that subject as well. So no, I don't necessarily think it's a wasted spot. I think wasted is completely subjective in what you find interesting. To like a God of War fan that's going to, pick up Mortal Kombat because of it, that's certainly not a wasted spot, because, there are several other characters that might, not be as important to the franchise that might have made it, and sure, they would have gotten another chance, for another game, say a 3D character era game, or even Rain himself. If he would have been put in, that gives him more of maybe a potential spot into story mode. But like I said, I think they planned story mode exactly the way they want it, and I don't think that would have mattered whether Kratos was in or not. I don't think anything would have changed, honestly, other than the fact that maybe Rain might have gotten tacked on in there, but I don't know if I necessarily believe that either. Go ahead, Shadowloo.
Okay, I wasn't gonna, but I will.
I can't tell who was trying to talk.
That was actually Razor, I believe. I think that was.
I think it was Temp.
Yeah, it was totally me.
Okay.
You really do sound alike. It's beautiful. I mean, I say let's roll with that. Let's assume it's true. Let's assume that guest characters are not contingent on development time. Or better yet, let's assume the number of characters in the game are not contingent on the amount of development time and resources. If it's contingent on the story, then it sounds like that they could make more characters, but they choose not to because of the overall presentation. I don't know if that fixes the problem. It sounds like we've taken the problem of, okay, yeah, now a guest character's not a wasted slot anymore. That is true. But now it sounds like instead what the developers are doing is they're arbitrarily choosing not to create more content. Is that an alternative? Is that better? And I do have an argument for guest characters, by the way, and I'll get to that after everyone, has their due response. But do we prefer that development strategy? I just don't know if that's better.
I think what I would say, as far as well, first of all, I agree that I think they chose the characters they wanted to put in the game before they started developing, and Kratos didn't really steal any time that would have gone to Rain, because Vogel and the other writers had already decided, way before they even talked about putting Kratos in the game, there's no place in this script for Rain. Or we could make one, but imagine what that role would be. Would he really be any better off than Reptile or Baraka were? He's just another soldier in Shao Kahn's army. What are you going to do with him? So I don't think that Rain could have benefited, really, if Kratos had been left out. And if I were to point a finger at somebody on the roster and say, you're the reason Rain's not in this game, it would be Quan Chi. And not because I think there was a direct one-to-one transfer of let's have him instead of him. I just think Quan Chi being on the roster is the personification of the fact that MK9 is deliberately not a remake of the original trilogy. That everything that they could have done and chose not to is summed up by the fact that he has such a big presence. Like, if you had remade the original trilogy without all the time changes and Quan Chi being there all the time, maybe there could have been a place for Rain. Maybe Reptile could have had a speaking role where he actively on screen finds out that Shao Kahn is the reason his people are extinct and rebels against him. Maybe Baraka could have had a romance with Melina on screen. Maybe it could have been 8 hours long, though. So, there's all these elements to it, and you can't just go, well, Rain's not in because they spent all their time making Kratos.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's too much of an oversimplification.
You also can't say, well, they could have made a different DLC character like an actual MK character if they hadn't made Freddy, because you could... If that's your argument, why not? Why isn't your argument they could have made more than 4 DLC characters? Why do they keep stopping at 4 or at 6 in Injustice? Why do they have this arbitrary limit? Just keep making more characters until the next game comes out. Look at how many characters there are every time Street Fighter updates.
Well, that's where I might disagree then, because I think, I don't think you can make the argument for Rain, but you might be able to make the argument for Boraicho, because let's say the reason why there's only 4 is because the development schedule for Injustice literally started after say, at the end of the development for MK9, then maybe you could make that argument. But, I mean, now we're in the realm of unprovable conjectures, it's hard to say, and I guess if you wanted to sell me on guest characters, what would make me be on board is if, let's say the revenue was so high for Freddy that MKX is now going to have a 35 character roster instead of like a 30 character roster. Now we have a higher budget that's been greenlighted by Warner Brothers. That would sell me, but we're just kind of treading unknown territory here. It's a lot of speculation. But I'm sorry, Cyborg, go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, you pretty much touched upon it, but my idea was, and in fact, I'd rather respond to what you just said because it just spawned a new thought. But on the idea that with Freddy, that what would sell you on it would be the higher budget, or a higher budget for the next game because of the way Freddy sold. Well, I mean, you could apply the same logic to what we actually did get between MK9 and Injustice, and the fact that MK9 DLC went over so well, and you could attribute that to anybody. But the fact that Freddy was the highest grossing, to as much, or as far as we know from what we've been told, that if Freddy was the highest grossing, that is likely that has to play some sort of part in the decision for Injustice to get 6 characters instead of 4, because the overwhelming response to MK9's DLC characters could be partly attributed to that. And say if somebody else was put in there, like a Bo Raicho, even though he's popular amongst the diehard MK fans that stuck through the 3D games, but a lot of people kind of fell off from that during that era, that, this drunken, chubby guy isn't going to be nearly as exciting as, say, Freddy Krueger from a popular 80s franchise that's, still alive to this day to some degree. So, I mean, there's that iconic status that you have with a guest character that's immediately there and immediately calls out to all sorts of fans, because it doesn't have to be the Nightmare on Elm Street fans that are into this. Horror movie buffs in general are just people that think, hey, that's freaking cool that I can take this character that's completely irrelevant to Mortal Kombat and insert it into a world that he doesn't necessarily belong, but you can kind of see the fit there between the horror aspect of MK that it does have, the gore aspect, and you can see that, and you're like, well, this would be cool to have, your kind of dream matches, and obviously we can get into that whole aspect of this entire thing, but at the end of the day, you might not have that with, MK character X or whatever inserted in there instead of Freddy. You might not have had that interest, and thus DLC might have underperformed, and Injustice, might have suffered because of that, or MKX by proxy, just because you didn't have that guest character appeal.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's probably a lot of unseeable benefits of the guest characters. And for that, I am grateful. I'm never cheering against NRS. I want them to make as much money as possible. But I do have lines, though, and I guess Freddy's not one of them. But let's say I don't want to cross that line and say, as long as it makes money, I'm okay with it, because they could do things that I think are genuinely offensive. Imagine if Mortal Kombat MKX. Imagine if they started releasing costume packs along the same lines of Dead or Alive, DOA. That might bother me, and it may increase the revenue, but I'm thinking I'm not really okay with that anymore. Now, I think it's no longer worth it to me. So did Freddy cross that line? I don't know. If you asked me 3 years ago, I would have said yes. Probably not now. Now I'm over it, but I definitely still think there is a line, though. I think there is a point where...
They kind of did do costume packs with Injustice. I mean, how much does DOA charge for them?
Well, I'm thinking just like the over-sexualization. I'm not... Well, although that is a good point, though.
They
DOA
did do a fair number of classic costumes
amount of
with
money.
MK9.
Yeah, and those were cool. Yeah. What's up?
Here's the thing, like, the costume packs in Injustice make me hope that, like in MK9, the only classic costumes we got were for the ninjas, because you only had to make one and then change its color a bunch of times. So, like, Sonya doesn't get a classic costume, Liu Kang doesn't get a classic costume, that sort of thing. My hope is we saw so many costumes in Injustice for so many different looking characters that I think it, like, bodes well, or at least I hope it does, for what we'll see in MKX costume-wise. Even if it's DLC and I have to pay for it, I'm the kind of guy who will, so...
Even that has its limits, though, because I think DOA, if you buy every costume, it's over $200, I think. something crazy like that. And
I wouldn't
that's
be
when I'd be
surprised.
like,
I know they're mostly just variations on here's everybody as a nurse, here's everybody in a bikini, that sort of thing.
Here's everybody in a skimpier bikini. Here's everybody in an even skimpier bikini. So on and so forth. I don't have a problem with costumes whatsoever.
I'll buy a costume pack for Reptile if he's in a bikini. I will buy a bikini Reptile.
That
I hope Ed's
disturbs
listening.
even me. No, I'm sorry. That's just wrong.
Oh wait, the bikini has to be metal, like the diaper thing in MK4. Just take the purple pants away, give him bare legs.
That's totally a fair point, though. I mean, the argument of, well, it makes them money, so therefore a bigger budget for the next game can get just as easily, turned on its own head and used as a counter argument as, well, if you just care about the money for the franchise, does that mean you think we should just accept them just completely milking this franchise for all it's worth? Like Marvel vs. Capcom and Street Fighter have been accused of by fans at certain points with on-disc DLC and, costume packs like you've talked about, etc. Even putting modes that should have been in the game as DLC just to, make extra money. Whereas I completely would disagree with that, and I would hate for that to happen. That would really annoy me quite a bit. But at the same time, I don't feel like Freddy is crossing that line. I don't feel like Kratos is crossing that line, because although you could say it's part of the same thing, well, they're just putting those characters in for money, at the same time, you are bringing in so many more fans, whereas putting modes and costumes and stuff like that aren't bringing in extra fans. And that's the whole thing. It's not just about bringing more money, it's potentially putting new eyes on the franchise of people that could become loyal MK fans through that exposure, that you have Freddy drawing people in to play this game, and then once they get their hands on the game, they're like, wow, this is actually pretty fun, this is pretty awesome. And then they start learning about the other characters and they start digging it. I'm not saying that's going to happen with every person that plays the game because of that, certainly not, but at the same point, it's gotta mean, I mean, that's how stuff like that works. And I feel like it probably did, because MK9 sold, I think, the most copies out of any game in the franchise thus far. I could be wrong on that. I haven't looked at the statistics in a while. But
easily, very easily.
Well, I mean, you don't really have the sales numbers from way back in the '90s, the original MK1, 2, and 3. But
yeah, true. It's not. It's obviously not.
It definitely
the same.
way outsold
They're out there,
like
though.
Deadly Alliance through Armageddon.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel like that kind of thing really can grow the franchise at its fan base, because you take a Freddy fan or a Kratos fan and expose them to the game, give them a reason to play and check it out because their favorite character or favorite iconic figure from this movie is inserted into the game, and they actually latch on to MK. That's a win-win for everybody, because that just means they're going to make more money, but on top of that, more importantly, they're going to have more fans, which means more people at the forums, more people for us to talk to, more people to play against, more people to carry this franchise into the future, because we're not getting any younger, and MK's got to make new fans to keep going, decades down the road, if it does go that long, well past what we've been exposed to in this current era. And I think something like that is very possible and very likely when you have those types of guest characters. And of course, that doesn't mean let's just make up half the roster of guest characters if we're trying to get as many fan base or people from other fan bases as possible to grow the fan base. Obviously, there is too much, but I don't think one or two characters breaks that limit. I feel like Soul Calibur's done it perfectly and have probably gotten a lot of fans because of the likes of Link, Spawn, Heihachi, Darth Vader, etc., that MK can do the very same thing, have one, maybe two characters in each game be guest characters, one as DLC, maybe one on the disc, and I don't see that being a problem. I really don't. I mean, yeah, maybe somebody's getting left out, but at the end of the day, MK has way too many damn characters as it is. People are going to be left out regardless, and yeah, I don't know. I'm repeating myself at that point, so I'll let somebody else go. Ice Baby, you haven't chimed in a while. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say that you can't... Someone's obviously going to get left out of this. I kind of understood why Rain was not necessarily a part of the official roster, and just looking through some of the sites just to get some info. Just how he didn't really have like an official debut until Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 on the consoles, because he first originated as like a small little snippet of the
demo screen
and all that, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, whoa, what's this character, who is he? And then he didn't get like a full biography until Trilogy, and I just feel like he wasn't really thrown into the Mortal Kombat 3 story until very late. So I could see why he got thrown in DLC, and I don't necessarily see him as a character that got pushed out because of a guest character. However, I will say I do agree about the whole Quan Chi thing, but that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I also agree that 2 guest characters is fine. 3 is probably stretching the limit, but it won't be that bad. But I can care for 2 guest characters, even if it's like one's on the disc and one's DLC or whatever. But yeah, I really don't I don't mind. It's Mortal Kombat. I'll get it. I've been playing since I was like a year old. I'll get any game, even if all my favorite characters are not in it.
Well, that brings up another subject kind of along the same lines in MK purity, because obviously this was a phrase thrown around a lot when this was all first announced, and MK purity is what, people that were against this thing, that's what they kept throwing out there is, I like my MK pure. They even threw in Xbox fans' faces as if PS4 or PlayStation fans' faces as if, oh, you have Kratos in your game, ha ha ha, I'm going to take my pure MK on the Xbox, even though Xbox was supposed to get, a guest character as well, but obviously, as we later found out, that didn't work out. But the point is, what is everyone's thoughts on pure MK? Spot being taken aside, just what is everyone's feeling on seeing somebody on the select screen that doesn't fit? One of these things is not like the others. That type of thing. Does it bother you to see a guest character on the select screen, or even Freddy, who was kind of on like a wheel that you had to scroll down to find him? Do those things bother you? Is the fact that just somebody that isn't, born and raised in Mortal Kombat land, if they weren't created for Mortal Kombat, does that bother you? Are you that against it? I mean, obviously, I don't think Ice Baby or myself are against something like that, but I'm curious to see what Temp has to say on this subject.
I definitely don't like that terminology.
That's a dangerous word to use, purity.
Yeah, it sounds like that camp is borrowing their terminology from like a white supremacist. I don't like the word purity. I feel like that's very charged, but it only bothers me on the select screen. That's the only time where I'm like, man. But like if I see Kratos or Freddy in like the pit, I still don't like it, but it doesn't like. It's whatever. The select screen, though, I just think of the history of select screens. I remember seeing, the MK3 select screen for the first time, the Deadly Alliance select screen for the first time. And I do like how just unadulterated MK it is, Am I up in arms? No, but does it bother me? A little bit. Slightly.
Well, if it bothers you, and you mentioned the whole, white supremacist type of throwing around MK purity and all that sort of thing, it's a little cultish and stuff like that. What would your answer be to alleviate that lack of desire of seeing them on the select screen? Would you say put them on a separate select screen? Because that sounds kind of
whole thing rotates to reveal 2 little character panels and nothing else on the screen.
On this select screen, you see MK Purity, and on the other screen, people that don't
Tanya
belong
on there, and you have a thing where when she flips around, Kratos is on the other side.
So what would you do to alleviate that, in all seriousness?
Other than Kratos, like a second select screen with just a giant face, like the whole screen is Kratos' face.
One big Kratos.
It burns, make it stop.
Well, honestly, yeah, I would bite the bullet because I really didn't like how they handled the DLC character icons. Because let's say Kenshi was one of the best characters in the game. Katana was top 10. She was also really good. But Kenshi destroyed Katana. So if you wanted to counterpick Katana, you couldn't do it. You could not do hidden select for the DLC characters because you had to go over the question mark. And so even though your cursor would disappear, you would magically see all 5 DLC characters appear, and they know they know you're going to pick Kenshi. Especially if it's the start of the tournament match, and no one knows who's picking what, So, yeah, I mean, I would bite the bullet. I would rather create a tournament-consistent select screen than have to improve the aesthetic, or at least in my opinion, improve it. But there's also the problem of, there's console exclusivity. Exclusivity? Yeah.
It's a hard word.
Yeah, that's another one. If it's console exclusive, second select screen. I don't really. Yeah, I think I don't want to say everyone would win, but if people like Kratos, they'll enjoy his giant face on the screen. But I don't even think there should be console exclusive guest characters because that tournament's banned that character's banned by default. They'll never be patched, or at least Kratos wasn't patched. They'll never be in tournament because the other half of the fan base can never practice with that character. So I would want, if there is a guest character, I would want it on both consoles for sure.
Somewhere Fulgor is very, very sad at these words, Tim.
Yeah. See, I actually want a Killer Instinct character in MKX. I don't care if he's not allowed in tournaments.
I'm an angry jackass, but even I have to bow to KI versus MK. That's something I've wanted to see for a long time, and I know Street Fighter versus MK is never going to happen. If there's one thing that bothers me about the face of a guest character on this Let's Screen, is that it makes me feel like I'm looking at a commercial. But bullet biting. There's not really much that I feel like that can really be done about it. It just takes me out of the experience, and that's, I think, what my pet peeve about the MK guest characters is. I'm out of my environment. Not going to use the word purity, though. That is wrong.
So, basically, do you think it would be better to put out an update or a patch or DLC that you can choose or not to choose to download? Therefore, the people that do want said character can download them for free and get them on their select screen. But, I mean, then it comes to multiplayer online, and that probably wouldn't work, and obviously tournaments
Probably
and stuff
not.
like that. So, I mean, that's obviously a remedy that wouldn't be much of a remedy, I'm sure. But it's been an idea that I know has been thrown out there when this whole thing was a big ordeal, that people wanted them on, specific downloads and stuff separately. But I don't know. Maybe there isn't a solution to this that makes everyone happy. I mean, there rarely is, obviously. But I don't know. I agree that I wouldn't want console exclusives, but at the end of the day, I don't really care regardless, just because I'm not a tournament player, so that's not something that I am too concerned with. But to make everyone, kind of flow and happy, I'd prefer there not be console exclusives. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's not something that specifically bothers me. I have both consoles, so I could choose whichever I like more for the character. It would definitely suck if I liked both guest characters and I only have to choose one, but at the end of the day, I'm playing it for Mortal Kombat, so it's not something that means anything to me. So,
well, that's historical too, because back when Soul Calibur 2 came out, if you had a PlayStation 2, you were stuck with Heihachi.
Yeah.
And no one gives a shit about Heihachi. Everyone wanted to play as Spawn or Link. So.
Oh god, yeah, we got the raw end of the deal on that one. That was terrible. What were they thinking?
Yeah, I had a GameCube, so I was pretty happy with Link.
Yep.
Asshole.
Yep.
Yes.
I stuck with Soul Calibur 1. I was bitter.
How did that Dreamcast work out for you, though? Controller there.
The Dreamcast was an amazing system for fighting games. You get used to it eventually. There was just so much on that console that nowhere else had. Like Rival Schools Part 2, Last Blade. So many, an insane amount of fighting games. I used to have endless fight nights with this friend of mine. And geez, eventually at some point you do get around the problems inherent with that controller.
Well, I guess, you can get used to anything. I had a Dreamcast and I never
At the time,
playing MK Gold, but
at the time it had the only good version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So yeah, it's kind of the only option.
Those days.
I want an honest answer about everybody's their idea of this franchise and what their expectations, the integrity behind those expectations, and what is the limit in their opinion. So I know this example was thrown out there as like, well, if you're okay with this, then how about this? This was thrown out there specifically as an example. I remember it clear as day. I didn't have to go back and look it up or anything. But someone said, well, how about Barney the dinosaur? What if they threw Barney the dinosaur? Obviously, that's an extreme, ridiculous example, but I guess it's just a matter of what kind of fan are you? Would you stay with Mortal Kombat and be a fan and still buy the game and still play the game if Barney the dinosaur was thrown on that select screen and you were forced to face people that decided to be funny in their opinion and play as Barney the dinosaur? And we'll start with Shadowloo. Go ahead. Would you stay with the series and buy that game?
At the end of the day, I have sat through this franchise, through Mortal Kombat Special Forces. I can deal with having to rip the head off of that purple turd. In fact, I think I'd relish it.
Razor?
Yeah, no, I don't, I'm not gonna not buy the game because of one character who's not even canon, even if it's something as the stupidest thing you can think of,
All right, Temp?
Definitely. I don't even think that's a bad example. Like, I would be okay with that.
Better than Freddy and Kratos, is what you're
I
saying.
might purchase that for the purposes of having a training done.
Barney would
Come
have
on.
facial expressions unlike Kratos.
Why are you doing this to me? Ugh.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't really mind troll characters. I think if Freddy had been a little trollier, I might have been all right with it. Like, if Jareth from Labyrinth was a guest character, I'd be like, okay, I don't like guest characters, but this is fun. I wouldn't be up in arms about it. If I can think of worse guest characters, I can think of a lot worse than Barney, to be honest with you. Like Gears of War. I'm not a Gears of War fan. I think it's fun, but I don't like looking at it. I would take Barney over anything from Gears of War.
All right, and Ice Baby?
I would play as Barney. Just to see what he does. I would totally get it.
He has to sing the song in his fatality as he murders
Oh,
you.
hell yeah! I would sing with him.
Ow.
I
Give him
would
a-
that player. I would get on the headset and I would sing with him. Just
No, you know what would be really funny? If Barney didn't have any finishers except friendships.
Yeah.
Just he comes with 3 friendships.
Gives you like a hug or something.
And each character has their own individual, extremely uncomfortable animation for being hugged.
But God, how would battle damage work? Because I don't want to see Barney with like chunks coming out of him and just like
It would be
dino
stuff.
rib cages.
Stuff
Oh,
it.
okay, that's better then. I can do that. That's cool.
Just ripped purple fabric with white fluff coming out.
Yeah, I'm in agreement though. I would definitely play that game just because I'm a fan for life. I mean, there's very little. I mean, unless they just went completely sold out and just completely shit all over the franchise and didn't even care. Like, they weren't even trying. It doesn't have to be like something like botching story or throwing in a ridiculous guest character. It has to be something like where they're literally just not even trying. They're naming characters wrong. They're not even making people look the way they basically make Scorpion just a real Scorpion. Just like if they got that careless with it, then I would get a little bit turned off and probably give up after that. But in terms of guest characters, they could throw in absolutely anybody. As long as I'm still getting my Mortal Kombat, I'm perfectly happy with it. So that wouldn't bother me. And honestly, it'd actually be kind of funny. Quite honestly, I would get a kick out of it. I don't take it that seriously at the end of the day. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for guest character talk in terms of our opinion of past guest characters. But let's talk a bit about the whole MK crossing over with a whole nother franchise instead of a standalone MK game before we jump into our own opinions on hopeful guest characters for MKX. So what is everybody's thoughts on MK crossing over with another franchise? Because I still remember the huge backlash, at least split, amongst the community, the huge backlash when MK vs. DC was announced. I specifically remember that the silhouette and it was revealed to be Superman. And people were like, "No way! There's no way that's not going to happen." And sure enough, that was the image revealed, that it would be Superman. And then they came out with the Batman versus Sub-Zero and all that stuff. And yeah, from there is basically a huge shitstorm amongst MK diehards. But then most casual fans were like, "Hell yeah, this is awesome!" And comic book fans were like, "Hell yeah, this is awesome!" And if you're an MK and comic book fan, you're probably like, "Hell yeah, this is awesome." But the MK diehards that just want MK were not too pleased. So, Razor, what was your opinion on MK vs. DC being announced? How'd you first take it? And how did you respond to the game going forward?
Yeah, I remember when it was announced, and there was just, like, so much anger and confusion, which seemed weird to me. Like, I didn't realize there were so many people on the boards who weren't comic book fans, because I am one, and I think there are more now, like, afterward, like, they've sort of learned about those characters maybe from MK vs. DC or Injustice, and, are more accepting of them now, but I was really surprised that people thought Mortal Kombat and superheroes couldn't go together, because, frankly, I see Mortal Kombat as a superhero universe. These guys are characters who save the world with magic powers, and in some games wear bright spandex. I don't see how they're not superheroes. I mean, most of them even have, like, fake names. Like, what's the difference between Batman and Sub-Zero, really?
Yeah, Sub-Zero sounds like a villain or his own hero. I mean, that's not that different than Captain Cold type of thing. So
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah,
or
I
Mr.
mean,
Freeze. I mean, Sub-Zero could be called Mr. Freeze for all we know. I mean, if that's the way they wanted to go, people wouldn't think of it as anything weird. Just because
Yeah, I mean,
that's what
Sub-Zero
would
is
have been.
probably the most clever name any ice guy has
Yeah.
in fiction. Because, I mean, Mr. Freeze and Captain Cold are not the height of creativity, but
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're wrong on that. I think Bad Mr. Frosty is where it's all about. No, you don't screw with Bad Mr. Frosty. He'll mess
That's
you
old
up.
school.
Yes.
Brings me back.
All right, well, Shadowloo, what's your opinion on MK vs. DC? How'd you first react, and what's your overall opinion on the game now, or just the decision to make said game?
I made that sound like Tim the Toolman Taylor made back on Home Improvement, that thing. And to this day, I'm still not entirely sure what to make of that game. But I have been a DC Comics fan for a very, very long time, up until the whole recent New 52 thing where they've rebooted everything, and I kind of jumped off. It was
Man, the Batman comics. The main Batman line is amazing right now. By Scott Snyder. Yeah, that's right.
He's writing good stuff, but I don't approve of what they're doing with the Rogues Gallery. And if we start on that, then we're going to go off on another 2-hour tangent.
True. So let's let's not get into
yeah,
that.
let's not talk about that. It'll become the episode.
Pretty much. Sidestepping that here. No, I remember at the time, I was just like, how do they do this? Because can you really disassociate Mortal Kombat with from death? That was my question at the time. Because there was no way in hell, I knew at the time, that WB would be okay with, like, having Superman's fucking head chopped off. And I was afraid that what was going to happen was we'd have PG-13 fatalities, which is exactly what we kind of got. And it felt like it cheapened MK to me a little bit, but I was okay with it at the time. I think that the heroic brutalities got to me more than anything else. It seemed like they were really, really stretching. I don't know. Two great tastes that almost kind of sort of tasted great together. But looking back on it now, I don't have so much of a problem with the crossover aspect itself, as much as I do the awkwardness and stiffness of the gameplay. I feel like crossovers with MK are very, very possible, but I feel like in a lot of cases you would have to remove MK from its natural element. Like, say we had a hypothetical Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter game. While I'd want Ed Boon and the MK team to be involved with that, I would just tell them, if it was up to me, just hand all character design and push it over to Capcom. I think that everyone would probably be okay if there was a crossover with Street Fighter with no fatalities. I mean, MK characters in the Street Fighter universe. That's it, I think. MKDC felt like DC characters in the MK universe, kind of, if that makes sense. And I don't know. I feel like it almost worked, but not quite.
Well, in terms of violence, I mean, let me put this out there. Just an example. Which feels more like MK to you? The first movie or Legacy?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. My nostalgia goggles are permanently affixed to my skull. I mean, for me, MK1, in terms of like, the MK1 movie, in terms of everything that it's influenced and represented and made us consider and shown, and the personality that Goro had, I feel like MK1 is kind of synonymous with MK. I feel like it's a vital and crucial part of the entire series. Whereas Legacy, it's getting there.
In my opinion, at least, Mortal Kombat, the first movie, I mean, despite the toned down violence, is, it's a very accurate portrayal of the plot of the first game, and it added things to the franchise that are permanent parts of it, that are still with it today. What has Legacy added? Is it anything more than a flash in the pan, even though, hey, it has people getting their heads chopped off?
True, the violence does not make the game, I don't think, but that's...
Yeah, see, there are people who would argue that the fatalities do make the game, that you have to have blood to be Mortal Kombat, and I don't necessarily agree with that.
True.
I think that some, death is necessary. I don't think it has to be particularly gruesome. I don't... there are ways to show people die without, going the full Monty on the gore.
Yeah, I think Deathstroke's fatality in MK vs. DC was a great example of that, using shadows.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like if you were to remake the Mortal Kombat movie, if you wanted to have something like, say, Sub-Zero spine rip in there, you could totally do it with shadows on the wall.
Right.
Yeah, and my only problem really with the finishers in MK vs. DC wasn't so much that they were toned down, it's that they all look poorly animated.
Yeah. The animations were a bit stiff in that game, but obviously that's not the point of the whole crossover in general, so we won't get into that. If we ever want to review MK vs. DC in general, we'll get into that aspects, because it is something I'd like to discuss at some point. But yeah, so what are your thoughts, Razor, on the overall crossover with MK?
I just, I think that, how do I put it? There are a lot of ideas that I like in MK vs. DC. And, I mean, first of all, in terms of the gameplay, which, is half of the complaints about the game, you have to remember the time we were in, coming off of the Deadly Alliance engine. I mean, if it weren't for MK vs. DC, we wouldn't have MK9.
It was a giant step in the right direction, easily.
Yeah.
Like, that was the game that reminded them, oh yeah, we like doing special moves. We don't need all this, like, real-world martial arts crap. And that was also the game where they realized, if we had taken the 3D out of this, we might have had a better game. Let's make our next game 2D.
Yeah, it's like they went 2.5D, so they kind of went halfway, and they're like, you know what, this would be better in just regular old 2D, and they were definitely right.
Yeah. But, I mean, there are, in terms of, like, the lore, how the two universes sort of fit with each other, I mean, it's a little awkward at first, I think, to think about. And, I mean, there is an argument to be made that the only reason the game was even conceived of was just to copy Marvel vs. Capcom. They were like, oh, the X-Men and Street Fighter fit together, so we can have the Justice League and Mortal Kombat in the same game. Why not?
And I'm completely okay with that, even if it was just copied off, because, hell, a lot of things aren't original these days, so why not? I mean, Marvel is great, and if they can go with Capcom, then that's awesome, but I love Mortal Kombat, and I love DC superheroes, so that's like putting peanut butter and chocolate together for me, so I was all for it, personally. So, yeah, I was...
And I mean, like I've already said, I think of the MK characters as superheroes and supervillains to a certain extent, so I don't really mind them interacting with other superheroes and villains as long as, the plot makes sense, which MK versus DC's mostly did. I mean, they have, Mortal Kombat is all about portals and travel between different dimensions and, worlds crashing into each other. So why not have Earth meet an alternate Earth where, different heroes live? My only problem with it was the rage is the cheapest plot device in the history of cheap plot devices.
God.
It wasn't just a dumb idea from a writing standpoint, but it also led to most of the bad voice acting. Was somebody screaming the words, "The Rage!" Especially Captain Marvel. I like that character, too. Disappointing.
Yeah. All right, Temp. What's your opinion, real quick, before we get more in depth with this? Kind of give us your initial thoughts, real quick.
Well, I mean, at the time, I was pretty upset, but it had nothing to do with MK versus DC. There was a 5-month countdown or something like that, and it ended up being a giant bait and switch. I thought I was waiting to find out the aftermath of Mortal Kombat Armageddon. And then I'm just waiting, edge of my seat, and the countdown ends. And first of all, the embargo wasn't over, so they didn't show anything. Then, 30 hours later, they revealed MK versus DC, and then I realized we're not going to find out what happened after Armageddon, are we? And that's why I was livid.
That drove me up the wall.
Yeah, and a lot of people, too, I'm not even against the idea. I think it works. But to me, it's not about whether it works or not. Is it interesting is more my thing, because to me, Green Lantern doesn't become more interesting when you put him next to Raiden. Scorpion, he doesn't really become more interesting next to Superman. It was never a problem of do these worlds mix together. They do. I always thought they did. I just felt like, if you take Ryu and put him next to Scorpion, then Ryu does become more interesting, although that's not hard because Ryu is basically a glorified homeless person. But that still works, though. That still kind of, it meshes, in a way that kind of, I feel like when you combine MK versus DC, you get the best of both worlds. I feel like if you combine, Killer Instinct or Mortal Kombat, you get this whole new creature, which I didn't see in MK versus DC. It really felt like two halves, of a different product kind of duct taped together, which is not bad. I mean, even, Marvel vs. Capcom, did that mix? No. Venom doesn't make more sense next to Mega Man. Those games are awesome, but it's not because I feel like they mix. They're awesome because they have one of the greatest combo systems of all time. I've never seen a combo system with that much freedom, with that much liberty to it. And also, it's just so empowering. You can do all these crazy, large-scale things in Marvel vs. Capcom that you can't do in any other fighting game. I don't think anyone really cares that Spider-Man is next to Zero from Mega Man X. I don't think anyone's really blown away by the combination. People just really like Spider-Man. They really like Zero. And they have all this variety to choose from, So, was it bad? No, I don't think Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe was bad. Do I want to see it again? I mean, I have Injustice, which is a great DC fighting game. I have Mortal Kombat 9, which is mostly a very good Mortal Kombat fighting game. I don't think we've created anything special by mixing them together unless the relationships are there. Let's say Green Lantern or Batman. Batman has this amazing relationship with Sub-Zero. They really click. You have this beautiful dynamic, and it's just so fun to see the two interact. That would be great. Are they going to do that? Well, I'm not convinced. That's not what we saw in MK vs. DC. Now, I don't think we did. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, that's maybe the sort of thing that we'd see in a sequel, which apparently very few people in the world want, but I definitely do, mostly for that reason. And, I mean, you absolutely have a point that we don't really see any, new insights or anything special in terms of, characterization or interactions in MK vs. DC story mode, but I feel like there's sort of an exception to that in the arcade endings. Some of them, I think, have really inspired ideas, and one in particular has always struck me as something they should have done in the main games, and that's katanas, where any hope of restoring Edenia is gone, so the survivors move to Shang Tsung's island and claim it as their own. I would like to have seen that happen in the Mortal Kombat universe.
Yeah. It definitely would be pretty awesome. I would love to see that whole story and more interactions between the characters, like you were saying, and just getting more in depth in the story between the two universes. I would love to see that going forward if the sequel was ever added, and I definitely think that should be part of the main game.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the endings were just sort of take an element of one character and apply them to someone from the other side, like Kano started painting his face like the Joker. The Katana one was basically to give her her own Paradise Island like Wonder Woman. Jax becomes Cyborg from the Teen Titans, etc. But some of them were like sort of how the plot would go in a sequel. Like there was a bit about Lex Luthor stealing the Outer World Investigation Agency's portal tech and using it to team up with Quan Chi. Or like Quan Chi basically making this deal with Raiden because something was wrong with Raiden's powers, that he's like, here's a kryptonite necklace and it'll fix your powers and now you have to do what I say. And you know, some of that stuff we could have seen in a sequel and it would have been maybe interesting, you know, story.
For sure. I'm totally with you on that one. Ice Baby, what are your thoughts on the crossover in general and MK vs. DC initially?
When I first saw it, I was for it, even though I wasn't too heavily into the comics, even though at the time I was getting back into Batman with all the movies. And Mortal Kombat versus DC happens to be one of my favorite Sub-Zero characters because he's had like the best moveset in my opinion with that whole teleport. I could literally do so much damage with that thing. And I personally thought it was a really fun game and I had no trouble with it. In fact, it was like I've mentioned all the time about how me and my brother would always play together. It was like the first game in a very long time where the two of us would just like come home from work and school and we would just be playing like crazy together. And I'm also, for all of you guys that follow the countdown to release thread, I actually asked a question a couple days ago asking if you wouldn't mind seeing more goreless fatalities, and surprisingly a lot of people said, yeah, bring that on. I wouldn't mind seeing that. And I didn't really mind so much the whole goreless fatalities in this game. I actually thought it was kind of cute, but that's just me. But
I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I just, if it's Mortal Kombat, if it's got the Mortal Kombat game logo and all that, if it's got the characters, it's got what its main focus is, I'll get it. You know, even if it's rated teen, it's still a fighting game. It's just less blood and less killing. I personally, that to me does not make or break it. Even though so many people don't agree with this, I even said, I will not care if Sub-Zero does not make it in. I still would get Mortal Kombat. Like how whoever said, if they start getting lazy, they don't make the characters the way they want to anymore and just gave up, I would stop. But, you know, after Armageddon came out, I was extremely disappointed with it. And that actually was a game that slowly started making me not like Mortal Kombat because I just felt it was so lazy. But that's a different topic. And then when I saw this crossover game, it got me interested again. I'm like, holy shit, I get to play with Batman and Sub-Zero and all this? Oh my god, I can't wait. But I will say, I did not care for the rage either. I thought that was stupid.
Yeah.
A very stupid gimmick.
Yeah, no, I agree totally with that. And I think that's kind of the problem that Mortal Kombat vs. DC suffered, as opposed to, or at least in comparison, Marvel vs. Capcom, is Marvel vs. Capcom didn't try overly hard to find a reason for why these universes were coming together. It was just all the fact that it's essentially Marvel versus Capcom. They are two franchises coming together in a mashup game where you can select people from either side and fight each other in a dream match, because I mean, let's face it, that's the big appeal for these types of games, is you want to see Batman fight Sub-Zero, you want to see Scorpion take on Superman, Raiden take on Shazam or Captain Marvel, whatever you want to call him. I prefer Captain Marvel, but hey, it doesn't make much sense that the guy, is named after the wizard that he apparently shouts his name all the time, but whatever. I'm not going to go on a rant on that, but regardless.
It's legal issues.
Yes.
Marvel
happy
owns
with
it.
that
They can't
choice.
help it.
Yeah. I think the big appeal is the dream mashup factor like that, and I think that's completely cool. So yeah, the rage was very silly, but that's one aspect that we haven't really discussed, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that the big appeal here is you're getting to take one character from one franchise and put him up against another character from another franchise. And obviously the gameplay is a huge factor. If the gameplay is no good, then it kind of takes away the specialness of said dream match. So whereas Marvel vs. Capcom really, really shines because it does have that solid combo system and solid gameplay between the two franchises, and they really feel like they mesh well because the art style is treated the same for both sides, etc. And they tried to do that for MK versus DC, but it just didn't. I mean, even though superheroes and Mortal Kombat characters, in my opinion, as was stated before, they seem to fit just fine. I feel like anybody that thinks otherwise or says otherwise, I feel like they're putting Mortal Kombat up on a pedestal, like Mortal Kombat characters look special and unique. It's like, no, they really don't. I mean, yes, they look awesome, and I'm not going to, trash the designs of the characters, but to say, like, they look unlike anything else in this world, well, no. I mean, a lot of the characters are ninjas, and I mean, that's obvious. Well, hell, I mean, a lot of the characters were based off of movie characters from the 80s and, movie icons, etc., that they were inspired from, so they can't really say, well, these are super original, so nothing else compares to this. Well, no, I mean, they are their very own superheroes, as Temp was talking about, so...
Speaking about costume individuality, I mean, first of all, as an artist who's drawn Mortal Kombat characters a lot, all you need to look like a Mortal Kombat character is to wear some sort of flap over your crotch.
That's a very good point.
Literally all it takes.
Yes.
Maybe shoulder guards. Huge
Yeah, pointy
guards.
shoulders, maybe a mask, but mostly the
Masks
flap.
are a plus.
Mostly the loincloth.
Gotta respect the mask. But, yeah, I mean, it's just... It's silly to me to think that these universes can't cross over, and I actually think, I mean, Razor said he would love to see another one. I'm in the same boat. Would I want it to replace a Mortal Kombat game? Probably not, just because I'm so interested to see where they go, but we have no idea where MKX is going to take us, and it might need that, kind of cooldown period, depending on where they take it, and they might shoot themselves in the foot or paint themselves in a corner again. So something like MK vs. DC 2 might need to happen, but the fact that they're waiting in between Mortal Kombat games and Injustice games, if they continue that pattern, switching them back and forth, maybe it's instead of an Injustice game that we get this, and I don't think anybody can argue with that, because that would be pretty sweet. You're getting more Mortal Kombat out of that anyways, but regardless, the big reason I want to see MK vs. DC 2 is just because Injustice has become its own established brand now, so maybe we should get Injustice 2 and... maybe one more Mortal Kombat before we go MK vs. DC 2, so we're talking, 10 years down the line here. But at the end of the day, I think with Injustice and Mortal Kombat both being 2D fighters, and Injustice had a darker tone, much like Mortal Kombat, and the character models are a lot more fitting now. They're not all big, bulky, muscle-head, blocky characters, kind of like in MK vs. DC. I think there's a lot more common art style and gameplay that you can intersplice between these two, because that's kind of the cool aspect is Marvel vs. Capcom. There's no Marvel fighting game specifically that's made by Capcom. I mean, I know there was the X-Men, Children of the Atom back in the day, etc. But there's never, there's no continuous Marvel fighting in its own, and then you have Street Fighter, and then they eventually cross over between the two. You just don't have that. Whereas with NetherRealm, what makes them so special is being under WB, they have that. They have Mortal Kombat, now they have Injustice, and they can make them independently and then occasionally bring them together. And I think that's incredibly awesome.
They kind of did have it at Capcom at first. Like, the Marvel vs. Capcom games kind of spun off from a series
Marvel
of
superheroes.
just Marvel superheroes, yeah.
How dare you prove
X-Men,
me
Children
wrong?
of the Atom before that.
You're out of here. Get out.
Which, if we want to go all the way back, this most supreme of ironies, talking about crossover characters and guest characters, guess who was a secret character in Children of the Atom? Akuma.
Oh yeah,
You
that's
forget about
right.
that?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Now I remember that. Wow.
And now
also
Scorpion's a
broken.
guest character in Injustice. So, meh.
Yeah, and that's not really surprising that they would do that. Though
I
they
wouldn't-
Well, he's the company mascot. It wasn't going to be anybody but Scorpion. He's in the logo.
yeah, he's in the
I wouldn't
logo,
mind-
folks.
Well, here's a
wouldn't mind seeing
question I
MK
would.
versus-
I'm sorry, go on.
Just to briefly say, I wouldn't mind seeing MK versus DC2 again someday. Coming out of it, the thing that left the bad taste in my mouth was because it came at that tail end of the 3D era where they still weren't really too sure how to go about creating a competitively balanced game and how to having that knowledge about paying attention to broken things. I mean, within 2 days, you go online with MK versus DC and everyone is either spamming Flash because he was broken at the start, or infinite combos with Superman and ground pound. That's what
Oh,
left
I remember that.
that's what left a bad
Ground
taste in
pound.
a lot of people's mouths, I think. At the end of the day, it was so close to being a great fighting game and missed the mark by that much, and still gets kind of attached to the 3D era in its own little weird bubble. But we are in a better place now. We have Injustice, and we have MK9, and definitely in the future it could work.
Well, I think
I just-
a big factor of MK vs. DC coming out of Armageddon and then going into MK9 eventually is, damn, did it create a real desire to see Mortal Kombat return to its roots afterwards. I mean, you can say, well, if MK vs. DC never existed, we would have had that return to MK's roots, but we don't know how Mortal Kombat 9 or 8 would have come out, how it would have gone. Would it have still stayed in that 2.5D plane? Very likely. And they wouldn't have learned so much that they did from MK vs. DC going. So we would have had a whole nother Mortal Kombat game in that kind of 3D environment that people were kind of getting tired of. So I think MK vs. DC was huge in getting us to MK9, which was really big. And I'm sure a lot of that came from the desire to see Mortal Kombat in its full mature rating, with the gory fatalities, with, returning to its roots and taking everything it learned from MK vs. DC and applying it. And hell, obviously, a big factor in all of this is, I think MK vs. DC, it kind of goes without saying, but that played a huge part in WB acquiring Mortal Kombat and NetherRealm Studios. And I don't think any of us would rather have it any other way.
Yeah,
Well, what also-
can you imagine if Ubisoft owned Mortal Kombat right now?
Oh, God.
Dear Lord. I was just going to say, though, and it wasn't just the lack of fatalities. It was the really restrictive roster size, I mean, if you take Darkseid and Khan out, there was only 10 Mortal Kombat characters in Mortal Kombat vs. DC. Maybe 11 if you count Chameleon. Are we counting Chameleon these days? I don't know.
He was in there somewhere, he was.
Yeah. We didn't see him, but, Chameleon's in the heart, so it's all good. But
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. He was both on the screen and next to me while I was playing. He has a really,
inside
really
jokes.
mean Batman.
But you know what, though? Where was the tag team? If you're going to make a counter game to Marvel vs. Capcom, I mean, maybe, of course, obviously there were time restrictions, there were money restrictions, Midway was going under. But I really think that game needed a tag team mechanic. Because that's the whole point of a crossover, in my opinion. What's
I
up?
think all of them need a tag team mechanic. I'm super bummed it's not at MKX.
Yeah, that is really odd that they
That's the worst thing about MKX to me right now. The tag's not coming back.
It was broken, though. There were, uppercut infinites in tag team.
Yeah,
It was
you
ridiculous.
can say that, but I don't really care.
Pick Ferrator. Fix.
Ferrator the mode.
Let's bring back Noob Smoke. Yeah.
Shut your filthy mouth.
Yeah, sorry, I'll repent.
I just blacked out. What did you say?
Yeah, I believe I said exactly.
He said,
Asked if you're
Can't even be repeated. It's so dirty. But
He asked if you're smoking yet, not if you're noobing it up.
bring out the troll hammer.
so ultimately,
Oh, God. God damn that hammer.
I think that's very important to
There's
point
nothing
out
more
here.
ninja than a rock on a stick.
Is that just how much of a big influence in MK's future MK vs. DC really had. There's no saying whether WB would have purchased the MK team had MK vs. DC not happened, but I'm pretty sure we're all pretty positive that's the case. That the relationship that they formed in that game in Midway's dying days was a huge factor for why WB saw potential in Mortal Kombat and wanted to take it under its wing. And ever since then, we've gotten a huge increase in quality. They're giving more time. They're more hands off, and they just have a huge budget and marketing behind the game to give it all sorts of attention that, as fans, we feel it deserves. So, win.
Yeah, well, if you remember what Ed said the game he wanted to make before MK vs. DC was announced, it would have been something probably with that engine, but, he was saying about, all new characters, only Scorpion and Sub-Zero will return. Maybe he's sort of doing now with MKX what he wanted to do then, but, it would not have had the engine that we have now by any means, so...
Yeah, for sure, and like I said, I wouldn't change a thing, honestly, between the games that have released in that regard. I think MK vs. DC led to a better MK9, and I think Injustice is going to lead to a better MKX.
Yeah. You had said earlier that your initial reaction, or one of you, I forget which one it was either you or Temp, said that your initial reaction was that you were upset because we weren't getting a sequel to Armageddon, so you were more like, so we don't get to find out what happens.
Yeah, that was me.
And
That was a pet peeve for me too at the time.
It didn't really bother me because, I sort of knew in the back of my head, even if I didn't want to admit it at the time, that Armageddon would end with everybody dead and a reboot. Like, I sort of predicted that game was their Crisis on Infinite Earths, that they were gonna reboot or, completely wipe the slate clean and do something that would not be a satisfying resolution to how Armageddon went. So I was just sort of like, they want me to be de-invested in the lore. So, sure, make a crossover game. Make me wait another 5 years to find out what happened. I'm okay with it, because I'm probably not going to like what you do. And I was kind of right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, and I think it also is touching upon what Ice Baby said earlier, in that with Armageddon, I kind of lost interest in general in the story, because the fact that they didn't have bios for every character, obviously there's just a huge roster, so it was a lot to ask for, and it was a huge undertaking to begin with. But it felt so lazy of a game. You had your creative fatality, which sounded so great in theory, but turned out to be so awful. And you had, the bios and endings the way they were, and it's just, I felt they painted themselves in a corner. I didn't like the idea of killing off most of the characters and just keeping Scorpion and Sub-Zero, because I still maintain to this day that a lot of my favorite characters come from Mortal Kombat 1 through 3, so if you're going to be killing off those characters, then, although I'm not going to stop playing, I'll give the new characters a chance. It's not what I wanted from the series. Being a fan of comics, you have the same repeating characters over, decades and decades. You still see your favorite characters over and over, your favorite villains over and over, and they just interchange them. They don't need to kill off everything to make things interesting. They just have to have better writing and not write themselves in a corner just to top the next one. And I just did not like that part about Armageddon at all in terms of story. And yeah, it just, with that being the way it was, MK vs. DC was kind of nice seeing not only superheroes come into the mix, but also seeing some of my favorite characters from MK 1 through 3 shown again in that setting. Like, I felt like if we're going to lose...
back to the iconic, the sort of original trilogy.
Exactly, and I was like, if we're going to lose these characters, this is kind of like... This is nice, because I thought I wasn't going to be able to play as them again in the next installment, so at least there was that to take away from it at the very least, and I was just happy to see that was the case. Is there any closing thoughts on the crossover aspect, or do you guys want to get into our own personal desired guest character going to MKX?
Is anyone else bothered by the fact that we kind of skipped MK8 and went straight to MK9? Is anyone bothered by the fact that we call it MK9
Yes.
MK9? Yeah, that drives me insane. I never was crazy about that.
It is what it is.
It doesn't bother me, but I can see why someone would be bothered by it.
It would bother me if MK9 was a direct sequel to Armageddon, but because it's a reboot, the number doesn't matter anyway. We just call it MK9 because it's way shorter to type than MK 2011.
True.
So I'm just like, fine, MK versus DC can be 8. It doesn't really matter anymore. The numbers don't count.
Yeah, it does get a little bit messed up and convoluted when you start doing reboots and messing with numbers, etc. Because how could it be? I mean, obviously it's the 9th MK, but then
is Superman Returns Superman 5? Does that make Man of Steel Superman 6? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, the mentality I encounter on the forums is that, well, it is MK8 because if you count chronologically, and I'm thinking, but yeah, like you said, if we apply that logic to other franchises, we get all these weird results. You know, is Street Fighter versus X-Men, is that Street Fighter 4 or 5? I don't even know, you know? It's weird to me, and it seems like we should be consistent. This is one of the few literary conventions that I think are worth following, you know? I mean...
Well,
it doesn't help that clearly they've been getting it wrong for years now, because as we all know, Special Forces is the real part 1, Mythologies is the real part 2, and so on and so forth.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, now, how do you know Special Forces comes before Mythologies?
Clearly, Special Forces is the root of all wisdom and great gameplay. Oh.
Well, it could be, I was going to say it could be worse. It could be Rambo, you know, First Blood. And then it goes Rambo, First Blood 2, and then it goes Rambo 2, and then it's just Rambo. The number never got higher than 2.
We got Rocky Balboa, but we couldn't get John Rambo? What the hell is that about?
Yeah, there's so many franchises that using names and they mess it all up. I mean, the Zelda franchise is quite confusing that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is a interesting thought, and yeah, I don't know what to say to that. It doesn't bother me personally, but like I said, I could totally see where that does get a little odd that they would consider MK vs. DC part of the main franchise, even though they exclude other games in the series. But then you get into like the whole Street Fighter aspect and how they do like 5 million expansions per game. So then, you know, even though we've had like 15 different Street Fighter versions, they've only had technically 4 games. And that to me is just like completely confusing and annoying in its own right.
And Street Fighter the movie, the game as well. Where does that even fit in? So
yeah, that's
just into
ridiculous.
My list of most anticipated PSN re-releases. That's what it is.
Sure.
Says the guy whose avatar is literally the robot soldier guys from that game.
You're goddamn right I says that. Man, I actually remember an arcade presence for that game. Oh god. Oh,
man, things must have been really weird in Canada in the 90s.
No, it really was. Like, I think it came out at that really odd time. I think my arcade at this point this is an arcade in a really, really tiny, crappy mall, mind you. And the 3 games that saw the most action, this is before, like, a movie theater with its own arcade opened, like, the year afterwards. But there was, like, Ultimate MK3, Street Fighter the movie, the game, and this lonely Alpha 1 arcade cabinet. These were the games in this arcade of mine that got the most action. I don't know why. Don't ask. The weirdest thing about the Street Fighter movie arcade game is the fact that when it was ported to the PSX, it wasn't a port at all. It was not properly ported. They just reskinned Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo with movie figure skins. It was so bad. Track it down if you can. It's worth the money.
That actually sounds crazy. I'm going to check that out.
I won't do it.
No,
don't touch
that
game.
Don't do it.
I think I'm doing it right now.
Yes, give in to the dark side.
All right,
well, as quietly as I can.
With crossovers, real quick before we do go talk about the guest character we want in MKX, let's all list one crossover that we want most. If we could choose for MK to crossover, what would it be if you had one choice? And Shadaloo, why don't you start? You don't have to explain why too much. Just give us what your choice would be.
I would like to go back to the MK2 and MK3 sprites, throw them into Mugen, and add all the Street Fighter the movie, the game sprites. So it all looks ultra realistic, looks amazing, and it makes a lot of sense. No, I'm kidding. If I had to choose one, probably Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter, and I'd want Capcom to handle it. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
Well-
And Temp?
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think those characters actually make a lot of sense together. I think Ken Masters and Johnny Cage. I think Shang Tsung. I think Akuma. That works to me. I've been wanting that for years, and I'm actually one of the few people who thinks that is going to happen, because Capcom's not going to have a choice eventually. They're going to run out of money, and they're going to need that cash. So that's my opinion.
Razor?
Mortal Kombat versus Eternal Champion.
Yeah.
Nice.
Slick.
That was...
I
Oh my
think
god.
I like the. I just remember back in the Genesis days, that game was it was like that era's version of Twisted Metal Black. All the weird twisted ways the characters died, and that it was sort of fated to happen. It was a real downer game, and it was just sort of a weird experience.
Yeah.
I'd love to see sort of a revamp of that, and I think there's probably some way to combine the lores. I mean, let me just say, if not that, because that is a really long shot, then I think MK and Killer Instinct would fit together well.
All right. Ice Baby?
He took what I was going to say, Eternal Champions. Something about that game was just fantastic. That or the game that cost a Piscina brother his job, Bloodstorm.
That's right.
If you actually see some of the gameplay, it's actually kind of interesting. Despite everyone's got these ginormous shield-like armor on their one arm. And I kind of want to see what happens if you take limbs away in the actual fight in Mortal Kombat. What would you do if you suddenly don't have legs?
That would be cool. You would lose normals. You would only have 3 buttons to play with. I think that'd be kind of tight, actually.
I wonder if there is a way to make a version of a gruesome Tao Feng that doesn't play like shit.
Is it too late to change my answer to Shaq Fu? Can I not do that anymore?
Oh god.
I'd love that.
Clay
Just
fighter.
picture Quan Chi in the middle of a round, just ripping a guy's leg off. Just walks off to start the next round, whoop-de-doo-doo-doo, flipping it over his shoulder, wearing it like a boa. This is a Quan Chi move. He'd do it.
You had to fight with your stub. It does less damage, but still effective.
Just a flesh wound.
Does
Smaller
anybody
hitbox.
remember the fighting game Bloody Roar?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yes.
love Bloody Roar.
Yeah, I wish that
love Bloody
returned.
Roar.
I wish that returned.
I think Bloody Roar was one of the first games that actually had the story mode where the cutscenes were between each fight. I mean, they were still pictures and text, I think, but that was sort of. Whenever we talk for years and years about how a story mode should be done in a Mortal Kombat game, I'd always say, do it like Bloody Roar. I mean, how hard is that?
Yeah. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with MK versus Street Fighter, just because that is the dream matchup for, the classic fighting games, the big boom era for fighting arcade games. But, I mean, beyond that obvious answer, I would go with MK versus Injustice, just because I would like a solid 2D plane fighting game between Mortal Kombat and DC characters with the quality they're doing now, because I can't go back and play MK vs DC now. It's just too late for that. It's just not going to happen. And
Yeah.
I want a game with the quality that they're putting forth now with all the characters that I love, because I'm just a huge MK and DC fan. I mean, that's pretty much, that's just, those are my two favorite franchises that exist. So, I mean, I would love to see that, and I'm sure we'll get that one day. But MK vs. Street Fighter is just too good to pass up. So I really hope that does happen one day. But all right, let's jump into the guest character that we hope MKX has. And I don't know if we want to list two, as in one for the actual select screen and one for DLC, or if we want to just do one. Probably one would be simpler. So if you could choose one character, be it DLC or on disc, console exclusive or not, which character would you choose to be in the game if you had that pick? Shadowloo, give us your answer. I bet I can't guess what it is.
I think you can. Go on. Tell me. What am I thinking right
I'm
now?
thinking Machamp, because he's going to be in the new Pokemon fighting game.
I don't know what a Pokemon is.
Are they actually calling that game Pokken?
Yes.
I have
Tekken
no idea.
Pokemon?
I thought it was Pokken, but yeah.
We can quibble about pronunciations later, but
My answer is unequivocally Fulgore. I am a lifelong Killer Instinct fanboy, and I really would love to just for no other reason than I want to see him go up against the Cyber Ninja.
Oh yeah,
That's like something I've been dreaming of since I was like 15 years old. It needs to happen.
I'd love to see
Fulgore
that.
versus like Cyrax or Sector. What? Take your pick.
All right, Temp, what would yours be?
I don't even have to think about it. It's not going to happen. I don't think it can happen anymore, but I would pick Raziel from the Legacy of Kain's Soul Reaver. I miss that guy so much. And when they announced PlayStation All-Stars, I was like, holy fuck yeah, I'm going to get Raziel back, finally. And he's not in the game, which I don't know why. I don't know if that was a legal thing, but if they had shown a trailer before the game came out of Raziel, I would have just gotten up and bought a PS3. I would have told my boss, I'm like, sorry, I got to go buy a PS3. And that would have been a thing. But for some reason, no, I'm still waiting. I think I'm going to be waiting for a very long time. And if they don't do something soon, that voice actor is literally going to die. I think he's like late 70s, early 80s. He's literally the voice actor for Papa Smurf. That dude has seen some shit. And and we're running out of time. The guy who voiced the Elder, the octopus thing, that guy literally did pass away a few years ago. God rest his soul. So, yeah, just nervously waiting for Raziel to come back in something, but yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think they feel like they told the whole story of that franchise. So maybe if there were remakes or something, like, and hopefully they'd be like the Resident Evil remake, not a reboot.
All right, Razor, what would your choice be?
This one's pretty easy. Ash from Evil Dead. I'm not even going to explain it. I'm just going to leave it there.
All right.
It speaks for itself.
It works.
Mysterious.
I can really see it.
Yeah,
Just
I could
over.
totally see him in there. That'd be great.
Oh man, his dialogue with Cage would be great.
Oh, it would. Yeah. If they got Bruce Campbell on there, that'd be amazing.
Well, you have to get Bruce. I mean, it's not him without Bruce. That game where the poker game that Valve, I think it is, makes, they didn't get Bruce. That was a mistake.
Oh god. I'd go. Speaking of the horror movie thing, I'm also a big Friday the 13th fan. So seeing Freddy go into MK9, I was pretty disappointed not to see Jason in MK9 as well alongside him, because there were those rumors that, this Halloween they're going to release Freddy and Jason as DLC characters for Mortal Kombat as like a Halloween themed DLC, and I was like, man, that's totally up my alley because I'm a big horror movie fan, a horror movie buff, you might say, and I even have a custom painted, actual cast Jason mask, actually right above me right now, kind of to my left. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the series and horror movies in general, so I'd be down with, Michael Myers or any of that kind of nonsense, but I don't think he fits as much as Jason does. But I just think the aesthetic of Jason with MK characters, I thought they did Freddy really well. I thought he had really fun gameplay. I loved his fatalities. I loved his ending. I just thought it was so interesting how they worked him in. And I guess Jason, they planned for Jason, but he didn't end up working out for whatever reason. They said his gameplay.
Yeah, I heard some stuff about how Jason doesn't make sense as like a guy who moves fast and jumps, which
that's not true.
Maybe kind of true.
No, it's kind of true with zombie Jason, but Jason wasn't always dead. I mean, Jason of parts 1 through 4, not dead, and he moved quick. And if you want to count the reboot as a part of this, he moved quite freaking fast. So I think it could work.
Question then: which Jason would you pick out of 1 through Jason X? What was your
if I'm gonna? Okay, now you put me on the spot, but I'm totally
bag on the head.
Totally on this. Bag on the head is great, Jason. The thing is, I'd want Jason with multiple attires, and I would pay for them. I would. I don't care, and I think they would sell well to at least Friday the 13th fans or horror movie fans, because I think Baghead Jason or Hockey Mask Jason or Zombie Jason, I think all three of those things are necessary, and they could do it easily because all you really have to do, I mean, even though their outfits change throughout the movies a bit, all you really have to do is, darken up his skin and put, a little blood on his mask, and you have Zombie Jason. If you have bag on his head, you just put a bag on his head with coveralls. But yeah, I mean, Or overall.
I don't know. He had a real cool look going on at the end of that one game or movie where
Jason
you can
X.
sort of see his spine sticking out the back of his overalls.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's part 7.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the ones with
Kane Hodder.
Corey Feldman.
Oh, Corey Feldman?
That's
1
4,
through 4.
I think.
He was only in part 4, so I don't think you saw his spine. He didn't become zombie Jason till part 6. But
no, maybe I'm thinking of the psychic girl then.
Yeah, it's the psychic girl. That's part 7, New Blood. But yeah, that's where he was all torn up, and you could see like his bones and stuff. So that's definitely what you're thinking, because they tried to put all the damage. Okay, I'm geeking out. Sorry. Like everyone's like, I don't care. Get on with it. Talk about.
I'm
Mortal
interested.
Kombat.
I want to know. This is very fascinating.
But yes, in
here's
part
what I was
7,
gonna,
he had all the battle damage he ever got in any movie. They went back and watched them all and put every little nick and scratch and tear on his outfit all in that movie. It was actually quite cool.
Well, you said earlier that it was a shame that the Freddy we got didn't look like Robert Englund, and I mean that's kind of because they based him on
Jack Earl Haley.
Yeah,
yeah,
which was a mistake.
That's what pissed me
Rorschach
off the
guy.
most about him easily.
There's something else that
Freddy
bothers
is
me about
iconic.
that.
Robert Englund is Freddy. I don't know why they couldn't do that.
For sure.
It's not even just the fact that it's not Robert Englund. It's that the new Freddy Krueger is not just a child murderer. He's a pedophile, and that's gross to me. I like the Robert Englund version better because he was a sadist. You know, I mean, you could make the argument that he was previously.
They did play up the child kind of pedophile in later movies.
Yeah.
They hinted at it a lot. I mean, even in Freddy vs. Jason, he's literally licking the picture of one of the little girls. So, I mean, they hinted at that before. It was always kind of hinted at. I don't think they ever outright said it. But yeah, definitely in the reboot, they played that up.
I'm sure they went with Jackie Earl Haley just because they wanted to promote the latest movie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is WB that owns NetherRealm, of course, so I'm sure they had all the say in which version was chosen. But yes, I would have definitely gone with Robert Englund with that too. But yes, moving back to it real quick, I would love to see Jason, whatever outfit, I really don't care, but I mean, you have to have the hockey mask at least. Otherwise, I mean, that is his iconic look with the machete. And I think his gameplay would completely fit Mortal Kombat. Just have him move at a medium pace, and he could just be a power hitter. He doesn't have to be a speed character. With how well they diversify things, especially with variations, I think Jason could really work. His special moves are a little bit harder, but I mean, he plays with different... he's used different utilities and tools to kill his victims, so I think those can make for some interesting specials, as well as playing up with his lore, etc., etc. Yeah,
I'd love to see a stage fatality for him in the Living Forest, where you're in a sleeping bag and he just picks it up and breaks you in half across the tree.
They need to do that regardless. They just need to have that because that is hilarious. But yes, I would love to see his fatalities.
I don't know. I was thinking maybe like they could have the Camp Crystal Lake stage, and for the stage fatality, little boy Jason drags you into the water, and for some reason you wake up in an ambulance. That would have been my take on that. But
that's genius.
That was actually
I want to see like Baraka waking up in an ambulance.
Yes.
That was actually like a really, really big missed opportunity that they could have had something with Freddy for MK9. Having his own stage would have been 10 kinds of messed up.
Oh yes, that would have been amazing.
Take your pick. Boiler room filled with glue and a insect lady with her skin coming off. So many nightmarish images you could pick from.
Or it could just transition, because I mean you are in the nightmare realm, so it could just transition on a drop of a dime. It could just be a really creepy stage that transitions between location to location without you having to like uppercut anybody, but just as you're going, it just all of a sudden morphs into something else completely creepy. And
suddenly there's a bed with a hole in the background and you're both being bathed in Johnny Depp's blood.
Yeah, that totally would have worked. I completely agree with you. I really, now I'm just getting, because the big thing is, small rant, these characters don't get their own video games, not since the NES. So, someone like Freddy and Jason and the like being included in these games, even Ash, like they don't. I mean, I think Ash had like a PlayStation game or something like that.
He's had 2 or 3, but they're not great.
Yeah, exactly. And
the PS1 was terrible.
Bringing them into this game gives fans of those characters an outlet to finally play as those characters. Because even if you do play their actual games on NES, you don't play as those characters. So it's just an untapped market, in my opinion. I mean, I can see why they don't want to make a serial killer game because, the way the media reacts as it is, but those are characters with such iconic status. Everybody and their grandma knows who those are, at least, that lived through the 80s, so it's just a shame that they don't have an outlet, and Mortal Kombat delivered that with Freddy, and I'd love to see Jason get that treatment in MKX. Please, if anybody's listening that can make that happen, make it happen, please.
Well, I just like to say, if you're going to do another horror character like Freddy or Jason, do them both. Like, nobody in the world imagines playing as Freddy in a fighting game and doesn't imagine that their opponent is Jason.
Yeah,
it's
just,
I agree. You're only getting half the fantasy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really think they made the wrong call on not including him. So hopefully that's remedied. Otherwise, I guess we'll have to go from MK to Injustice to a full-fledged horror movie icon fighting game, intertwined in there. It'll happen. No, I'm just kidding.
Chucky will be the best main.
Yeah. But, alright, Ice Baby, what would your one pick be?
Mine, even though I know it will never happen and I am dying for a sequel, which I seriously thought was going to be announced at E3, Corvo from Dishonored. That is one of my all-time favorite games. I just think he's a badass. He's got numerous abilities that he can use, such as he can teleport, he can summon rats, he can take possession of you, he can knock you with wind, and he can also just shoot you in the head with a crossbow and such. So I would definitely see him. But going back on a little tangent about the whole Raziel thing, yes, rest in peace, Tony J. No one will ever be able to replace that guy. He is the voice of God. Just dead. They did.
Morgan Freeman has a bone to pick with you.
Morgan Freeman is wrong.
They did officially end the whole series with Defiance, which I do not appreciate because I wanted more, but I don't know where I've read it, but I think the reason why they didn't want to do any more was because I think several of the voice actors just didn't want to do the game anymore. I'm not sure if that's true or not. And they're supposed to come out with a multiplayer game called Nosgoth, but I do not know what it plays in with the whole Soul Reaver story. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, the common criticism is that the story hit a logical ending, and it did. I think Razor even mentioned that before, but my thing is, at the end of Defiance, spoiler alert, Raziel and Kane finally kind of reach, a consensus. They both finally understand each other, and then the game ends. And I really would have liked to see a post-Defiance relationship between those two, now that there's a union, now that they're kind of in sync together and they have the same agenda. Because there was room in that franchise to have new villains arise. If you're rebuilding Nosgoth, there were directions to go. It would have been a different story. But I just think that dynamic was so good, but it was so one-dimensional because it had to be. There was really nowhere to take the franchise. Oh, let me rephrase that. They couldn't do the franchise without them hating each other, without them not getting along. That's because Raziel wasn't in the know and Kane was constantly manipulating him. Now that that's done, we can have those two characters interact on a whole new level, and we're never going to see that happen.
Nope.
Those sons of bitches.
Exactly.
All right. I'm just going to throw this out there. I know I talked it to death, but a new Friday the 13th movie comes out next year, towards the end of the year, Friday the 13th, I think in November, and totally it goes in sync with the game's DLC. Come on, make it happen.
If you want to believe IMDb, Jason Voorhees is in the game. I mean, like we were saying earlier, in terms of motion and moving around and being a slow person, yeah, hell yes.
Wait, why would IMDb have that? There's no.
Why would Jason have a credit? He doesn't
talk. Yeah, I was about to say, he doesn't talk.
Precisely. Grunts.
You guys realize Mick is going to have to make a link for the Friday the 13th section for the podcast.
Grunts,
yeah.
Jason's whole thing is that he's the most quiet motherfucker ever.
Well, Michael Myers is kind of right up there. But
Michael Myers never says a thing.
I don't think Jason has
he just
footsteps.
breathes heavy.
Yeah.
Jason makes no-
doesn't
Jason
have
teleports.
footsteps.
Jason teleports.
He does
That's
teleport. That
established.
should be a freaking special move as he just appears behind you. And
But it
then you
has-
trip
but-
all of a
but
sudden
you-
for some
you
reason.
You can't see him move. The camera actually has to focus away from him and then back
That
to
would
the
be
space
sick,
where he
though.
was.
That would be badass. I would actually be all over that.
Okay. I'm done with Jason for now. For now. I'm bringing it back up closer to the game. I'm sorry, I have no outlet to talk about this.
The portal for Camp Crystal Lake is now closed.
Damn it, now I'm so wanting to see that happen. Damn you, podcast. Alright. Okay, well, let's move on to our retrospective character of the week as chosen by Ice Baby. And that character is none other than her own favorite character, Frost. So we'll be talking about Frost's history with the franchise over all the games she's been in. She's quite the resume. And we'll talk about our favorite fatality out of all of her fatality. So we'll jump into that right now. And Temp, why don't you start us off? Actually, why don't you give us your thoughts on Frost and your favorite fatality?
Well, I'll hand the mic to Ice Baby. You know, it was her choice.
Whoa,
and
you were just.
yeah.
I was gonna save her for last.
Okay.
No, it's
right.
fine. No,
okay.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Ice Baby. Go.
Trying to be a gentleman. Ladies first. What's your
You
problem?
just make me look like a jerk now, just by proxy.
Heck. Maybe because you are one.
Hurt feelings.
And then next week there was one less member of the
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
He'll be stricken from the record books like Chris Benoit. Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. Well, anyways, go ahead,
I got
Ice
dark.
Baby. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I honestly don't know what made me like this character so much. I guess it's because I really wanted a female Sub-Zero, and I wanted it for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, Deadly Alliance came out. And I just remember someone bringing this game over to my house while my brother had all of his friends over, and I'm just randomly picking some character and it happened to be Frost. And of course, no one expected the little sister to kick everyone's asses with her, and I just did. And she was actually, believe it or not, the first character that I've ever performed a fatality with, because I could never do the Sega Genesis ones because my brother never told me them. Couldn't do any of the Mortal Kombat 4s because I never looked it up online. And then all of a sudden, Deadly Alliance came out. I'm like, ooh, okay. I guess like just because she's blue, I had a phase where I had to talk text in blue a lot. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that.
I remember that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know why
I
I
have
did
to squint
that.
to read your text sometimes. I have on MKO. I have like the noob Cybot background, so it's like black and then there's blue. I'm like, oh god, my eyes hurt.
Yeah, I don't know what made me write that. I felt like being a noob that day and decided to go, oh, blue text. I'll keep doing this until someone tells me stop or I get bored of it. And eventually I got bored of it. But
So you ignored all the people that begged for you to stop. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Nice.
They were pleased that fell
I
upon
remember it
deaf
would
ears.
change tint once in a while. Like it used to be like a blue-green, and then it was like the same blue as a Link is.
Yeah. And then it was pink for October for breast cancer. And then
Where's the gray for testicular cancer?
and then it just turned into other colors, and then I'm just like, you know what? This is really starting to bother me. I'm just gonna stop. And even though I think it annoyed more people because they could never quote me correctly. Like they could never close the quote right without them getting highlighted. So that aggravated everyone
It's
else.
contagious.
It's like, oh my god, the whole text is blue. What did you do? It's not my
What did
fault.
you do to me? Why is my text blue?
But
Yeah, you might want to get yourself tested.
But anyways, I really enjoyed that character a lot. I just wish she kind of had a different ending, despite that, she only was in 2 games, and they didn't really do anything with her. I felt like they didn't even do anything when she debuted either. just like, oh, she's Sub-Zero's little sidekick. Oh, she's gonna do something to him at the end. And it was even in a predictable ending, in my opinion. I felt like, oh, she's gonna do something fairly evil, even though it's not gonna get her anywhere. And then she doesn't appear in Deception. And I go, well, that was a waste. So, and they get my hopes up. And then here she comes in Unchained. Same story. Oh, Sub-Zero, how could you? I'm going to go after you again. Oh, I got frozen. And then Armageddon came, and she becomes like this insane goddess who freezes hell. And if she were to ever come back, I have a huge story idea. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it in some fan threads that I've made. I have a way to bring her back. I'll save that for like later. Just if we're going back to like, what would you say? What would you want for Frost to be if she's to come back in MKX?
Oh yeah, we'll definitely cover that. I believe some people ask questions based on MKX if Frost makes the cut.
Yeah, but that's my opinion. I like her a lot. I wish they would do more with her. I really think they could have done something really good with her, but they decided not to. And I don't know why they couldn't. So that's just my opinion. And one of my favorite fatalities of her, I actually never played Unchained, and I looked up the fatality when you guys mentioned it. I actually like that new twist where the whole body explodes. I say more of that.
So that's your favorite fatality of her fatality?
Yes.
For one fatality.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, I'm not going to go to temp. I'll tell you that right now. So,
He lost
Well, the
his
thing
shot.
about
He's
Frost
done.
is
can't
Frost
go
is
to
really-
Razor.
yeah,
So I guess Shadow, you're the only one left. It's just me and you, bro.
Well, I don't hear anyone else in this chat.
Yeah, it's just me and you.
Excellent.
That's fine.
No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, though.
I think kind of my favorite Frost trait was when she woke up after she was, after Sub-Zero had, like, placed her in the crypt. She gets up and, like, what's the first thing she thinks? Wait a minute. He left me for dead after I tried to kill him. That bastard!
Yeah.
I love that fact. She's just... Oh my god, what is wrong with you, you terrible, wonderful person? Like, I think that she's got one of those personalities that just, like, begs expanding on. And she's a character that I'd really love to see expounded on in like, actual in-game CG and story mode. And I think she'd be wonderful for it. I love the fact that she just had this kind of, like, shifty-eyed, I don't like you thing with Sonya. Gave Sonya someone else to dislike apart from Kano. And her moveset, while, on one hand, yes, she kind of got Sub-Zero's leftovers, it worked well as a building block for Sub-Zero because it kind of showed, that at that point in Deadly Alliance that he'd moved beyond those techniques, and I thought it was a really, really nice touch. I thought that she'd have that potential to go places. And I do hope that she does come back one day. I do wish that her outfit was a little bit less derivative, although she's Lin Kuei, so they're all going to wear some variation of like the whole ninja gear, but what are you going to do? No problems with her. I would prefer that she came back over Li Mei. I really do miss Frost, and I hope that she does feature in MK10, at least in cameo form. I do.
Take that back.
No.
No,
I refuse.
Don't take it back.
No. I'm sorry.
All right, I guess I'll round this out for the final opinion.
Hang on.
I'm just kidding.
My favorite fatality is yes.
All right, great. Sounds good. Good choice. I really was a fan of that one too.
It took me a while.
I think the other one's kind of overrated. It's too gory, too over the top.
All right, okay. Question: hypothetical Frost X-rays. What would people like to see?
Oh man, hold on. We'll talk about that after this.
Okay.
We only have one more opinion to cover real quick.
You're gonna get it, man.
Yeah. No, my opinion of Frost is she was actually, I think, beyond my old school favorites just from previous ones, but of the new characters of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, she was actually my favorite that was introduced because one, I'm a big fan of Sub-Zero, so I really dug the ice powers. Ice is my favorite elemental power, more so than fire and electricity, etc. So I'm a big fan of ice powers, and I really dug the way she used them. I loved her little slide power, because you could duck under projectiles, so I was a big fan of that. It just seemed like something completely different than MK really had at the time. I really liked her daggers instead of the Corey blade, and I liked the story behind it just because she's not as advanced yet, so she had to create daggers. They were fun to use in the weapon mechanics in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. I liked her backflip escape as her taunt, I believe. I liked her look, and I liked how she froze the ground. It was kind of different way of freezing the opponent. So it was just a cool, I like the changes that they made for her to make her feel different. And I feel like in this game, in MKX, they could go even further with that because, like I said, they just have much more creativity when it comes to their characters nowadays. And they give them a lot more special moves to play with, starting with MK vs. DC, as Ice Baby pointed out, which I was a big fan of as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of hers in general. I like her look. I like her powers. I like the idea of having a female character like that because it's just different from a lot of the other female characters. She's a lot more elemental based, and that's just not something we've gotten thus far. And yeah, I'd much rather see her than Lee May as well. I mean, I have no problem with Lee May coming back, but I'd rather see Frost personally. And my only real complaint with her is the story. As Ice Baby pointed out, it was pretty much repeated from Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance to Unchained. She screws up and then gets frozen, and then she has a new lease on life, and she chooses to screw up and get frozen again. It just kind of made her look stupid and weak and dumb. It did not do her any justice in terms of making her seem like any sort of threat. And regardless of her Armageddon ending where she actually accomplished something, I don't know. I didn't like the way they treated her. And I thought her bio gave away the big twist that she turned out evil, because it was like her ultimate, motives will be revealed, was like how they ended her original bio in Deadly Alliance. Or at least it was for her alternate outfit. And it was just like, oh, okay, well, clearly she, is going to stab him in the back or something. But yeah, I thought she bit off more than she could chew, and that's cool and all, but they didn't really advance or anything after that. And largely because we had Deception and then Armageddon, so that was pretty much the end of those characters. But I'd love to see her back, and my favorite fatality of hers was her fatality.
I have to say something about her moves, because this is always a big topic. Everyone, every now and then, would always say, oh, she's a big clone. She has every Sub-Zero move. The only Sub-Zero move she has ever taken identically is her ice puddle in Armageddon. Because every other move that she has, despite it, she slides, she ground freezes. It's her own twist, like with Cassie Cage having similar moves, but they're not clones. They're not identical moves. They look similar, and people tend to get cloning and similar confused.
Well, we live in a world of extremes. You're either really amazing or really awful. There's no gray areas. You're either a clone or you're not. I mean, it's just like
you're either original or you're Jarek.
Yeah.
It would just always aggravate me, because it's like it's not the same move. Frost has it where she slides under people, and yes, Sub-Zero had that move, but it was only, I believe, in Mythologies that he had it where he slid under the entire person, not just stopped at the ankle. With Frost's ground freeze, she freezes the entire screen, not just throws a puddle on. She had her own unique look to these moves, and I would just never like it when someone just says she's a clone. She's a blatant clone, because she's not. They made it separate. They made her different, and I like that they did that, and it's just not an obvious clone. And to see her moves and just know she's a student, saying how what she would do in Mortal Kombat X if she came back, not. Ice doesn't need to freeze you. It can slow you down. So she could have more like an area of effect move where she can throw mist at you and it slows you rather than freezes you. Or, I don't know, she could throw a snowball at you and just stuns you. Like, what the fuck did you just throw at me? Something like that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I don't think she needs to be a clone. I don't think she is a clone. And with the new variation system and Just like I said, the overall creativity. There's so much you can do with ice, and I completely agree. But before we get into like the variations in MKX talk too much, because like I said, I know a certain user at least asked questions about her in MKX. I think that's actually all the questions were asked were about MKX and her inclusion. Let's get Razor's opinion on Frost.
Am I allowed to speak now?
I thought about it, and you know what? Yes, I guess.
You are as kind as you are wise.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know. Never mind. Just go.
All right. Well, I actually really like Frost, and I don't know if it's that I like her so much as I like what she did for Sub-Zero's story in Deadly Alliance. Because, I mean, I've said before, Kuai Liang is my favorite character in the franchise, and my favorite, like, the game that made me appreciate him, that made me, made him my favorite character was Deadly Alliance. Like, I didn't care about him quite as much when he was the renegade guy on the run in MK3 and 4. But when he came back to the clan and took it over, and, the costume design he had in that game where, he was older and his scar had turned blue and all that stuff, that really sort of made me sit up and take notice, and I liked, what they did with him there. And so to give him in that game a student was, I thought, a really interesting twist. And to have that student be, basically the Anakin Skywalker to his Obi-Wan Kenobi, this sort of arrogant jerk who, couldn't be taught to be humble and it ended up turning on him in the end. I liked that. I thought it, gave him more to work with, and it gave her a character, whereas if she had, been like a loyal student, just like the Robin to his Batman, I don't think she would have worked. I think she would have been pretty boring. The only downside is, like Ice Baby said, they didn't do anything with her in the sequels. And I think part of the reason for that is I don't think she was supposed to be in Unchained. I think that was sort of like in Armageddon, the scene where Taven wakes her up from the block of ice. I mean, that room she's in is modeled to look like the Cryomancer tombs, and they're supposed to be an outworld. But they're in the Lin Kuei headquarters in that game. I think, somebody noticed and realized, crap, how do we explain how this room changed realms? So they decided, we'll have her be frozen twice. Like, she escaped Outworld, came home, and got shoved in a block of ice again. And I guess that's the best they could do, but it's still really stupid.
Yeah.
Like, couldn't they have just made that room look different? Or,
I guess you could say that she stood Frosty.
Please don't ever talk
no,
again.
No, you couldn't say that.
I'm banned now,
You
aren't
would
I?
say that. Why?
You're just gone.
I did this for you, Razor. You can talk again. Now I can't.
You better not if they're gonna sound like that. Keep those thoughts to yourself.
I didn't quite hear you, Shadow Luke. You say that one more time? I was kind of having some interference.
I don't want to tempt fate anymore here.
Go ahead, tempt it. See what happens.
I will come for you in the night.
I'm
Tempt
far
it.
too proud. I'm proud enough already.
Do it. Try it. Do it.
I had my moment.
I got my finger on the hang up button on your name. Do it. Do it. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going. You're good.
Yeah. So I don't know. I really, what I would have liked to see more out of Frost is how she would interact with other characters. Like, once she, betrayed Sub-Zero, what if she had run into Noob Saibot and joined forces with him? Or, Sub-Zero met Serena in Deadly Alliance while he was still traveling with Frost. How did those two characters get along? That would have been nice to see. But, we didn't get anything in that regard, and that's a shame. And, I mean, we can talk about it more when we get to the questions, but I'm not sure what sort of role she could serve if she were in MKX, because I guess she could be a student of whichever Sub-Zero this is, because apparently he's Lin Kuei, and apparently Sector's not turning them all into robots, so I don't know, it's hard to have a character whose entire story revolved around one thing, in her case, the heel turn, and then go, well, this is a different universe, we can't do the same thing. So it's like, what do you do with him now?
Heel turn means turning into a bad guy, in case you're not a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally...
It's on TV tropes too, and now that I've advertised TV tropes, the rest of your day is just shot. You're going to be there for hours.
All right.
So you're welcome for that.
Temp, what's your thoughts on Frost? Oh wait, we didn't get your favorite fatality. Hold on.
Oh, gee, let me think. Is it the one where she freezes them and kicks their torso, or the one where she freezes them, kicks their torso, and they explode all over? I guess it's the one where she freezes them and kicks their torso.
Hold on. Let's not just make this choice too easily here.
Yeah, don't rush. Really think about it.
Yeah, give it. Let's weigh the pros and cons.
I really think I like those frozen legs left behind.
Do you mean to tell me you didn't create a better one in Armageddon?
Ah,
sure.
That's funny.
No.
But all right, Temp, what's your opinion of Frost and your favorite fatality, of course?
I like Frost. I like her from a gameplay perspective more than a story perspective. The fact that she's not as good at cryomancy, the fact that she is a novice, and she hasn't really learned discipline yet, I thought that was a really good foundation for gameplay, because now you have this whole new palette of freeze moves. Maybe instead of having a complete freeze that, demobilizes you, she does like a frostbite thing. So now when she hits you, yeah, frostbite. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, but yeah, so when she hits you, you do more damage, and that's one possibility. She can also have sort of like a binding move where she'll freeze your limbs, and that doesn't do any damage, but now all your normals have more startup frames. So you can still play the game, but you can't really do footsies anymore. You can't really whip punish. So you're stuck with jump kicks, and you're stuck with like jumping combos, and you have to play this much riskier game that'll last for maybe 10 seconds. Also, Sub-Zero can play Rushdown, but that's not really what he's known for. He's decent at Rushdown because he has such a good down 4, And with Frost, though, the fact that she's not disciplined, the fact that she doesn't have a lot of training, and that she is so emotional, she could be this crazy cool Rushdown character. And while Sub-Zero is trying to train her, saying, oh, you need to keep your distance, you need to maintain your stance, you need to be patient. And she's like, I have a better idea. Stab, 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 stab. And that's the character in a nutshell. She could be like this crazy, kind of furious cryomancer fighter. And we didn't really see that. I don't know if they thought that far ahead, or if something like that just wouldn't work in the Deadly Alliance engine. But I think there's room for it now. I think there's a lot you could do with just this character who doesn't really know what they're doing, so they're not restrained. Now, that said, do I want to see her in MKX? I guess a little bit. She's not one of my favorite characters, but I like her enough. I would be interested. And if we don't see her, I think it'd be a shame, because I want to see her eventually. I never thought her story was closed, because if she did break out of the ice and she was kind of pent up about Sub-Zero, there's possibilities of other mentors, Let's say Daigon, well, that probably wouldn't work because of the timing, but say she joins the Red Dragon. They could use her talent. They were still relevant to the story. There was somewhere to go there. And that could take her personality into sort of a final stage where she's not just vindictive. She's an actual villain now. And that pretty much covers it for her. I like the design. I like the hair. She's one of the few female characters who wears pants. I can't think of too many others. That was cool, I guess. So yeah, pants. Favorite fatality. And yeah, it's well, you know what? I'll revise it. We'll stick to the freeze. Your opponent's in a giant block of ice. Maybe instead of knocking the ice over or shattering it, she knocks her fist through it, so you're still frozen, but now your torso is just all shattered into pieces. Or maybe she cracks it down the middle and you God forbid, split in half. I don't know. Maybe that could
I think
be a thing.
Shadowloo would like that direction.
Absolutely.
He does love when people split in half.
Absolutely.
Ferritor!
Yeah.
Now, you know what'd be really cool? If she just like let out a really, really fast, hard-hitting punch to the head level just behind the ice. So it cracks and it splinters, but not all the way. It doesn't shatter completely like you might expect it to. So you just see their head frozen there in several pieces.
That would be cool. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to go about it. I mean, you could even be comical about it, where she kind of like cracks the ice a little, then like mid-sweeps the ice block, so now your hands are next to your ankles, so that could be kind of cool.
What you're saying is your favorite fatality of hers is one you just made up.
Yes. Either that or give her Cabal's mask removal. I could be all over
I think at least one person does that at MK3. Except without the ice part. The hands just float.
That works. We can have floating hands. I'm not against floating hands, so yeah. But that's Frost in a nutshell. But Shadowloo mentioned X-rays. I don't really care for what they've done with Sub-Zero's X-rays, so kind of more what Cyber Sub-Zero had. I like the idea of creating ice blocks and then using that for melee. I think that's a really good direction. What they would do specifically, it's kind of hard because a lot of the stab fatalities have been taken. Well, not taken, but I can't think of a way to do something new with like what Melina did with her size. I think it would be kind of boring to do that with Corey daggers. I don't know. I would be hard to think of something specific, but that's a starting point, though. I would do something like that.
All right, let's get into forum questions because it actually covers a lot of this discussion on. We probably covered a bit of it already, but I know a lot of it was centered on her being an MKX and our thoughts on it, etc., etc. So, Temp, if you want to start reading off some questions and who asked said question, then we can jump into that.
Yeah, well, right now I'm looking at Acid Layer's question. Or Acid Slayer's question. He had some ideas for variations. They're pretty good. A lot of them are kind of like passive variations. Like she'll create like an ice dome, or she'll create like a blizzard aura, and that has a sort of status effects. That could be cool. The thing is, though, I don't really see Frost as a defensive character. I feel like Sub-Zero covers defense so well, and I think her personality lends more towards offense.
Yeah.
So I would like to see her either kind of have like her own Cryomancer variation, where she creates her own set of kunai and daggers and whatnot, and that's more for like, frame traps and maybe damage. Or she has like setups, like she'll have her ice puddle, but let's say it's perpetual, it stays on the ground under certain circumstances, so she can like keep you in the corner. She can like create ice walls. I mean, Sub-Zero has the ice shield, but what if she created pillars that the opponent actually had to like, use normal attacks to get through? A lot of space control. Anything that helps her get in is what I would take for the variation route.
Interesting. Anybody else's thoughts on variations for Frost? Ice Baby, do you have any in mind?
Not really. I haven't thought too deep with variations. I was more so in my way of trying to create what she would be like. I was going to save that for last, but I had like more of her fatalities and X-rays in mind. But I guess she could have something to do with her blades. That is, if they still have it with her, she can have more so with not so freezing things, but like I said, how she could have mist and use that in a way, sort of like she could teleport with them, be more like range in one of the variations. Kind of like, I guess she can be all over the place. I don't know. I just feel like the way that I pictured her, she would really play really different. And just kind of like a character who's still getting used to her moves. So something like that, where they're not strong moves, but it's like, how do I put this? They're not really strong, powerful moves, but she has a lot in her defense, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I got you.
So more like how I saw Melina. I never saw her as a very powerful character in 2011, although I got backlash a lot on one of the Mortal Kombat sites because I never saw her as a powerful character. Everyone's like, oh, well, you're playing her wrong. It's like, I don't really know how to play a character wrong when I'm playing her the way I want to play her. And her combos don't really seem that powerful to me along, like, say, Shiva or something. So she's kind of like the Melina character, where she doesn't have too much in her arsenal, but she has enough to be like a defensive character in her variations. So like I said, daggers, range, and I guess whatever close up and personal thing. That's how I see it.
Gotcha. All right. Any other thoughts on her variations or special moves in particular? Any other ideas anybody has?
Well, I actually really liked Ice Baby's idea of having freezing moves and properties that can actually maybe slow someone down. I think that you can actually probably build an entire variation around that, and that could be something that's incredibly unique, speaks to her. That's something I'd really see Sub-Zero doing. I also agree that you should probably have a variation around like ice daggers to give her range and maybe a slightly higher damage output, more of a risk-reward kind of thing. I don't know, for a third one, what the hell? I wouldn't mind seeing her have her very own like ice medallion for like, I don't know, the strongest kind of single hits, less focus on combos. I don't know. It's tough. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that myself, but there's a lot of potential for mainstream variations there though. Definitely. Speed, slowing, I like it.
All right. Any other thoughts from you, Razor, or anything? Or do you want to move on to fatalities?
I don't know. I sort of picture, I guess, when you guys talked about like slowdown moves and something that would like trap the character, I'm sort of picturing something that's sort of status effecty, like Kotal's totems or Quan Chi's ground buffs. I mean, sort of a style like that would be interesting to see, maybe. I don't know, that might be kind of complicated for a character like Frost, who's supposed to be sort of just learning her moves, but at the same time, I mean, Sub-Zero's 3 are spoken for, so why not? But I think I mostly agree with Temp that I see her as a character who wouldn't have a lot of defensive options, who would be very, fast and aggressive. And I think at least like 2 of her variations, like one should be very rush down, sort of like Scorpion's ninjutsu, but with the Kori daggers, something like that maybe. And I almost want to say like only the style that's not the 2 fast ones should have like a classic freeze move that slows or stops you. Like in the others, she should just throw projectiles or be in your face. And like for like the projectile keep away style, you don't want to copy like Killer Frost from Injustice too much. But I'm sort of reminded of her and Glacius in the new Killer Instinct game. Both have moves that sort of make giant icicles shoot up out of the ground. And that's sort of how they keep you away. And I think something like that would be interesting.
Yeah. That's definitely how I see her playing out if she were to be included in the game, is, like you guys said, pretty much sums it up, fast and aggressive. I see her hitting... not doing hard hits, so her hits don't do a whole lot of damage, but she's very quick in her hits, and she can quickly add on damage just based on how fast she is, and a lot of keep away stuff with projectiles and things coming out of the ground and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't see her much as a defensive fighter, because that's more of a slower, methodical, somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who's very experienced to kind of take their time. I see her as a very... almost arrogant in the sense that, we've seen from her story that she thinks she can take on Sub-Zero, of all people, the Grand Master of the Lin Kuei. So she's clearly confident, like overly confident in her own abilities. Not to like a Johnny Cage factor where she's cocky about it, but she's just arrogant in the sense that she thinks she's more powerful than she is. But she's also very aggressive and very vicious. So very fast and aggressive gameplay makes sense for her.
I think if you gave her a voice, she could be kind of Johnny Cage-ish. I mean, but more of a jerk. Like, there's something lovable about Johnny, whereas Frost comes off as just like a total bitch to me, I think.
you total bitch.
I mentioned X-rays before, and I swear to God, I could really see one where, like, she just flips over and, like, just kind of, without even facing you, puts her hand backward and forms a Cory dagger from her hand right up someone's ass. She'd do that. She really would. She's terrible, and she'd love to inflict a very kind of personal pain upon someone.
At the very least, she could slip it in their spine and, literally stab someone in the back. I had a thought about her normals. I'm thinking about, like, Cyber Sub-Zero and MK9. The thing I like most about him is he has these flashy, almost useless, but just really cool-looking spinning kick moves.
Uh-huh.
And we're obviously not going to see that from this game, Sub-Zero, so I think it would be really cool and fitting for her personality if all those needlessly showy spinning kicks were part of her arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like in those little video endings at the end of Deadly Alliance, she does do like a bunch of flips and jump kicks and all of that, so that would totally work for her. Just adding as a second guess to that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Temp, any other questions to go to? I know there's a few others in there.
Yeah, we got some over here. We're kind of going out of order. We have one from Smokeman14 and
oh my
another
god,
from
I love
Ultra
that guy.
Kintaro.
Smokeman14, he's the one with the George Costanza avatar. It's hilarious.
Pretty awesome.
I love that scene. I love that. Yeah, no, it's just such a funny face George makes, and yeah, good stuff.
I was reading through the comments just now, and I'm like, I stopped and I stared at his avatar for a good 10 seconds.
No, I do that
It's
every
wonderful.
time. It's great. It's
Yeah,
tremendous.
here's sort of a historical question. Were we expecting Frost to take the place of Sub-Zero previously before MKX was revealed? Or I guess, maybe not a historical question then. Did we think Frost was going to replace Sub-Zero in the storyline? Was there just not going to be a Sub-Zero in MKX and Frost was going to be our Cryomancer? I think that's what he's asking. I did not think that was going to happen just for marketing reasons. I didn't really know what they were going to do with Sub-Zero, but I always felt that Frost was going to be delegated to her own specific status. I never thought that they were going to swap Sub-Zero for Frost at any point in the history. And I'm glad they didn't, because the things I like about Sub-Zero don't really translate to Frost. I really like a lot of the lore behind Sub-Zero. That's kind of why I stood by the character for so many years. And Frost, she's just not that integrated yet. She doesn't have all those characters that she has relationships with yet, for better or worse, and I don't think that would have gelled well with me. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I wouldn't have wanted to see her replace Sub-Zero and have Sub-Zero sit out just because I don't think so. I mean, it's plainly obvious that Sub-Zero and Scorpion are going to be in every game, but I do want her in the game at some capacity, filling up a different role, but still being an ice character. You can do plenty with that without, copying moves. So but I don't want to see her replace Sub-Zero's spot, basically.
Frost kind of fits the trope of like the overambitious overachiever number 2 who like believes that they can accomplish anything, but is dealing with powers that they absolutely have no idea how to properly channel. I mean, it's something that you see every so often in fiction. So no, just it's not going to happen. What I could see her doing though is, I don't know, I could see her taking a generation or so of like the Lin Kuei's younger, brasher upstarts and leaving with them and kind of forming her own small clan of assassins that would work for the highest bidder. That seems to be a thing that a lot of people at MK do, is form their own clans, but I could really see her being something natural. I mean, she could work for Quan Chi. It'd be a perfect fit. But replacing Sub-Zero?
Yeah, no, I mean, it never even crossed my mind, and I mean, I've read people sort of speculate about, could this character replace that person because they died in MK9, and for the past, 3 or 4 years since MK9 came out, we've had thread after thread about, the dead staying dead, and should that happen, why don't they do that? I don't want to see the dead come back because it cheapens it. Here's the thing. You can't watch the end of MK9, where Quan Chi and Shinnok literally say on screen, now that we have this army of zombies, we're gonna conquer the realms. And then go, I don't want to see those characters back. That's blatantly retarded. Yeah, no, I was just, Jax and Cabal and Sub-Zero, Kitana, Jade, all those characters who died, they might not be playable in MKX. Some of them I think will be, but they will be in the game because they already told us they will several times in MK9, and at least, once when Quan Chi was revealed for MKX, they said, he's got this army of Revenants and he's going to use it. So I'm a little sick of hearing people say they wish the dead would stay dead. I mean, I understand philosophically why you might want that, but right now is not the time, man. It's too late.
All right, Ice Baby, your thoughts on Frost replacing Sub-Zero?
I never saw her as a character that could do that. Even after listening to her bio card and how Vogel was saying stuff like, oh, she was not originally supposed to be in Mortal Kombat 2, but she had been talked about that she was going to be in a very early game, but for some reason they decided to go against that and just create Sub-Zero's younger brother. But I could never see her replacing Sub-Zero in a game, just like Power said, due to marketing stuff. I would see him being always a character in the game. But like how you guys have been saying, she can totally have a different story. Maybe one that doesn't even have to do anything with the Lin Kuei. She can have, since not everyone, but since a lot of people are having retcons happening, one would never know what they would do with this character if she were to come back, but would she be able to replace them? No. And going off of what Razor said, I too am kind of getting a little tired of people saying I want the dead to stay dead. You kind of can't do that from going from a game that just showed everyone getting killed and then coming back as the undead and just leave it like that. You kind of need closure. So kind of like how everyone's complaining, oh, well, Johnny Cage and Cassie and all of them, why are the parents coming back? You can't have a story that talks about someone and then not finish it. You gotta finish something. So I just wanted to touch up on that.
Gotcha. All right. One other question here real quick from MK Noob. Considering MKDA's female characters, would you pick Frost over Natara or Li Mei? And we'll start with Temp and just go through everybody and just answer this real quick. Would you choose Frost over Natara or Li Mei?
Well, Li Mei, definitely not. Naitara, that's difficult. Probably not as well, because Naitara, I think, could be really interesting in the modern engine. There's still a lot I want to see from that character. That's really... It's kind of unfair, because both characters deserve to come back so much, in my opinion, but Naitara, I feel like with the wings and the flight capabilities, and even the modern design, there's so many directions you can take that. I feel like Frost, from a design point, probably wouldn't be a huge departure from what we saw in Deadly Alliance. I think in terms of just analysis and discussion, I'd probably rather see Naitara. And Li Mei is one of my favorite characters, so that was never a contest.
All right, Shadowloo?
Well, we kind of covered that earlier. Yes, I would take Frost over Li Mei in a heartbeat. Natara?
Bastard.
50... I love you too, man. I love you too. Mwah. Natara, it's tough. Just based purely off of everything that we saw in Deadly Alliance, I mean, Frost kind of had something from the get-go, whereas I've said in a prior podcast that Natara was just missing a lot. I can see ways to improve her, and I could completely visualize a great, wonderful, modern 2D version of Natara. Wonderful. But I don't know. I do like Frost. I'm a bit attached to her. It's tough. So I take Frost over Li Mei, yes, but maybe not over Natara, assuming Natara was realized properly. If we were to just to port them straight the way that they are into a future MK game, I'd say no, I'd take Natara. I'd take Frost first.
Okay. Razor?
Yep. Out of the Deadly Alliance characters, I like Natara best. I don't know what it is, just something about her I think it's her design, really. Just I really like the look of the wings and both of her outfits. Something about it. I don't know, but as far as Lee May, I mean, I don't want to upset Temp, but we talked about Lee May in an earlier episode, and I wasn't quite as blunt about it as I'm going to be here. I don't like Lee May as a character. The only time I did like her was her Deception ending, where she gives in and joins Onaga. I thought that was the only time she really was interesting or seemed to have a personality. So, yeah, I guess if I were to rank them, it would be Natara, then Frost, then Lee May.
All right. Ice
Bro
Baby?
fist.
I would take Frost over Lee May, and it's because I did not care for her at all in Deadly Alliance. And Deception made it worse because I did not care for that ending of hers. As much as a lot of people liked it, I could not stand it. I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know what it is about that ending that just made me go, "What the fuck did I just looked at?" But I
can think of a lot of things I've seen on the
A
internet.
woman in a bikini hugging a giant Dragon King is a very goofy image.
Yeah.
I will admit that much.
That I think just that little hug embrace was like, oh my god, it's bestiality happening going on here. We don't need that new ality coming in. But I would seriously take her over Lee May because I found her as a bland character, but I did like her story in Deadly Alliance where she's the slave who's trying to free her people. I like that she had a MK4 ending where she didn't make it out alive or almost alive, depending on what you're seeing. With Natara, it depends on what they're doing with her. If they're going to keep this, if they're going to just do kind of introduce us to her realm without really introducing us to what it is, I want to see more of her. And like how Shadowloo said, they didn't really do anything with her, like specially. Yeah, she's from this vampire race. I want to see more of that. But I didn't feel like they did anything with her. And I'm not sure if it's just because of the engine limitations and all that, but I was really expecting her to fly, and I didn't get that, and it really disappointed me. She might fly if she comes back, who knows? I mean, you had Hawkgirl flying a lot, you had Raven flying in Injustice, so I'm pretty sure they could make it where she flies and if she comes back, but it depends on Natara, but I would definitely replace Lee May with Frost.
All right. Hold on. I'll let him do his thing. Or I thought I heard him coming back.
Well, I would like to simply interject here and to say that I've had to stifle laughter for the last couple of minutes because we have now successfully placed the image of Lee May and Onaga in an embrace as foremost in my mind as the cover for a series of softcore erotica novels in the Mortal Kombat universe.
I just walked in on that. What?
Of damsels and dragons.
Your favorite character has a fetish for dragon men.
I want like a cutscene of like, I don't know, Melina reading this in like her queenly chambers or something before being interrupted by someone.
Oh, poorly May. Yeah, that ending. It would not have been so bad if there was a follow-up to it, but yeah, we discussed that back in the day, or back, God, that was like last week. Yeah, we discussed that. I mean, it's a logical ending. I wish that wasn't the final word on Lee May.
Between the three of them, I would probably take Frost. I think I'd definitely take Frost over Lee May. I think that's kind of the common opinion other than Temp, but unfortunately for you.
Yeah, well, I'm used to it, man. There's not a lot of Lee May. Well, I mean, the Lee May fans that are out there are pretty fervent about the character, but yeah, it's hard to find middle ground Lee May fans.
I liked Lee May's gameplay, but I didn't really care much for her story. That's pretty much where that stops. But I I like Frost. I would definitely pick her over Lee May. Natara's tough. I kind of agree with Ice Baby and Shadowloo in the sense. Well, pretty much Razor said it as well. It really depends on which Natara they're bringing. As in, what are they going to do with between Frost and Natara? How they're going to treat each character would be my final judgment, because it is kind of a close, decision between the two. But ultimately, I'd probably go Frost over Natara, just because even though Natara is a more original character in that, we don't have another vampire chick, but we do have another cryomancer, so there's that going for Natara. But at the same point, it's hard to think of how they would do Natara, because she is kind of limited in, at least from what Deadly Alliance showed, of course, but that's a lot of characters. Most characters, if not all characters, had very few specials in Deadly Alliance. Deadly Alliance was like the MK1 of the series. They just had like one or two specials and one fatality, and that was it. But I'd be interested to see what they do with both. But yeah, I'd probably ultimately go with Frost, just because I see so much potential with her gameplay and story there. But that does it for MK Noob's question, and we have one last question that is kind of shared between MK Noob, Project Zero, and Ultra Kentaro, and that's basically, how would we introduce Frost into MKX with the given story changes that have happened? Because obviously the Sub-Zero has changed, and it's no longer Kuai Liang as far as we can tell. And if that is the case, and just the way it's obviously changed with the whole Cyber Sub-Zero and everything, how would we introduce Frost into MKX if she is to be included? So we'll start out with Ice Baby, because I know you had a big idea to say about how you want Frost in this game.
Yeah. So I was originally trying to make a comic strip, but for some reason my focus has been on this other story that I've been working on, but I still have the notes. What I was originally doing with her was that she and some other people in the Lin Kuei are kind of like escaping it because of the automation program that's going on. They don't want to be a part of it, so they're kind of escaping. And her friend basically sacrifices himself for her to escape, which basically leaves her in a lot of different choices that she can make on where her character is going. You can have her buddying up with, let's say, Cassie and being on the side of good, or she could, like, Raiden recruits her, but she butts heads with Cassie just for that Deadly Alliance scene where she and Sonya don't get along. Or she could be a neutral character where she can recruit her own Lin Kuei or something, where she gets all the survivors that escaped successfully from the automation program. Or she gets picked up by one of the evil characters in the game, whoever it is, whether it's Quan Chi or, I don't know, who else would be. I guess would have to wait to see who else gets revealed that's evil, because I don't even know if Kotal Khan is considered evil. I'm not sure. I tried checking up on the Wikipedia thing, and it says nothing, but she could literally have it go 3 different ways. She can be good, she can be neutral, she can be evil, just depending on if, let's say, hypothetically, they do something like that. She could literally go 3 different ways and have her own separate personality for each one. I mean, you have, like, the student who could, I don't know, she could still probably get not used to her powers, and she's joining on the side of good. So there's that student side, where her traitor side could be she's evil, completely evil, and sticks with that. Or you have, like, this, I don't know what this character is going to do. She'll be the neutral character. And I also wanted to add that I also had an idea for a fatality for her, 2 fatalities. Because I've also, this mind of mine, I always have, like, random different ideas. And I tried designing, like, my own fighting game idea ever since that one create a character competition in MKO happened last year with my witch doctor. I thought would be a really cool idea for ice character, and I guess this could go with Frost if they decide to give her like incredible super ice powers, is where she creates like 4 different ice clones, and you have like the buttons above them, and you press one of them and each clone does something different. Like she bursts out one of them and she just like stabs her ice daggers in the guy's neck, or other one could like burst into different shards and just like stick all over the enemy and just they fall down and die. You can have like the other one be just, she topples the ice clone down and just smashes into the opponent, crushing them. I don't know what we do with 4th one. I guess you could just like snap the guy's neck or something. But it was like kind of like a take on Kratos' arena in Mortal Kombat 2011, where you get to pick different torture devices. It'd be basically like that, where you have 4 different choices on what to do with her fatality.
Right.
And then her other one would just be like, she creates like this ginormous glacier behind the opponent, and it's kind of like she's playing those circus games where they're like throwing knives at you, but instead of missing, she's hitting you. And of course, she just like throws one after the other. I don't know. This might sound goofy, but she creates like this ginormous one, and you just rams right into it like an Iron Maiden kind of thing. I don't know. Those were my 2 ideas for fatalities, but that's my story on how I picture her being in the game. She can go 3 different ways depending on what they feel like doing. I personally don't want her to be evil, but someone said that it kind of gave her more of a personality, and seeing how I would assume this game would make her kind of interact with more people, it'd be a good chance to show that personality. So I'd say I would kind of go for the evil route, but after seeing those 2 horrible endings they gave her, I would kind of want to see her be good or neutral, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Okay, cool. Personally, I don't have much of a thought on how she could be introduced into MKX, just because it's not something I gave much thought. I don't know. I'm not a creative writer, so I can't really think of a good way to introduce her other than the way we've seen thus far. I suppose if I sat down for a while, I could probably come up with something that's somewhat interesting. But going off of what you said, Ice Baby, on just playing off the whether she should be good, neutral, or evil, and how that plays into her story, I'd almost like to see a good character that's conflicted, that's struggling with her own brutality, just and have that play up, that she goes from good to neutral. And I don't know if she ever crosses the line into pure evil, but she's just a good character, but that's really struggling with brutality and being, very over the top vicious with her methods, just because her lack of experience, her lack of knowledge with her powers is causing her to get frustrated, and she tries to overcompensate by just completely being absolutely vicious to her opponents. And that could be a struggle that she has with other good characters that are trying to calm her down and contain her in that regard and teach her, or whatever, however her story goes in that aspect. So I'd like to see a good to neutral character with a bit of an edge that makes her stand out a bit more, because she's just overly vicious and kind of pushes those boundaries on how evil can a character that's still technically good and fights for good, how can they be? Kind of like the Watchmen are good superheroes, but they have their own issues that they deal with that kind of play up that they're not, as even though they fight for good, they still have, they do evil things here and there. I like to see that with her personally. Razor, how would you introduce her into the game?
Well, I mean, first of all, you've got to consider that MKX is sort of spanning over 25 years, and that sort of raises the question of, like, how old is Frost supposed to be, and at what point in that time frame would you introduce her? Because, like, in the original canon, Deadly Alliance was 10 years after MK1, and that was the point where Frost joined the Lin Kuei, like right after Sub-Zero took over, he had like a big recruitment drive, and that's where he met her. So, I mean, she was supposed to be like a young person, but they never said how young, whether she was like a late teens or in her 20s or what. So, I mean, they could completely make up their age however old they want her to be. They could, retcon it so that she's, the right age during Cassie's time at the very end of the 25 years when Cassie's an adult. Frost could show up, or she could be there right after MK9, and they could pretend like, oh, Deadly Alliance happened right after MK3, whatever. Because, it's a reboot. They're doing whatever they want with things now, but, like, so just... That's sort of... My point is, like, you could have her be recruited by the Lin Kuei or Raiden or whatever team she's going to be on, really, at any point, which... makes sort of how you would use her unpredictable. But my inclination is to think that she would again work best as, being picked up by the Lin Kuei. And considering that the Sub-Zero in this game, we don't know for certain, but all, signs seem to suggest it's going to be Bi-Han. And they seem to suggest that he returns to the Lin Kuei and somehow the Cyber Initiative is ended, and he might even become Grandmaster like Kuai Liang did, since he has that variation. Although, like I said before, the medallion he's wearing in that costume doesn't have a dragon on it, so maybe it's just an int reference for the fans or whatever. But theoretically, if Bi-Han were her teacher this time, as opposed to Kuai Liang, like I was the one who said that I thought the thing that made her interesting and gave her a personality was the fact that she turned on Kuai Liang. And I don't think it's so much that being evil gave her character. I think it's being the opposite of her mentor gave her character. So if Bi-Han is a big jerk and he, emphasizes brutality and killing people, her character arc could be that she maybe doesn't feel so good about that and turns against his teachings. And, like, the most interesting thing to me about Kuai Liang in the original MK2 was his story was that despite growing up in this evil assassin clan, he didn't like to kill people. He had these moral qualms about his job that sort of contributed to him leaving the clan in MK3. And they didn't do that with him in MK9, but it would be interesting if they did something similar with Frost. Like, have her be the one who has, these reservations about all the killing and stuff, because she's being trained, to be a brutal killer by a guy who's a big fucking jerk. So I don't know, I mean, that could be something they do.
Alright, Tem?
Yeah, I think that's a good take on it. If Bi-Han brings out the better side of her, I would be interested in that, because to me, Frost is not essentially evil. She does bad things, but that's not essential to her character. I always kind of took Frost as someone who didn't have structure before Sub-Zero, who didn't really have much going for her before she became a student of Sub-Zero. And if she was this, say, like a street thief, or if she was stigmatized because of her powers, if you heal those wounds, or if she's harboring this delusion that no one cares about me, no one could ever care about me, I'm in this for myself because that's all I got, if you break that delusion, you could have a good character. So it all comes down to circumstance, Maybe let's assume that either Kuai Liang's in this game, or it's Bi-Han, but they have the same relationship. Even if she does have that mentality of, I do not care about Sub-Zero, I do not respect Sub-Zero, let's say there's a story event where Sub-Zero will risk his life for Frost. That could be a turnaround. That could sort of, awaken a better side of the character. It just all comes down to circumstance, because we don't really know. I don't think we know where Frost came from. I'm trying to think back to the Conquest mode of Deadly Alliance.
All it says is that Sub-Zero has like a tournament to find people who are worthy to join the Lin Kuei, and she just shows up. And there she is, and she has ice powers, and he's like, she has the same powers I have. That's weird. Where did she come from?
And that works. That's consistent. Oh, what's up?
Here's your free membership card. Come on in. The dorm room's this way.
Here's your lanyard.
Well, first of all, she won that tournament, so she was the best fighter there. But also, it's like his curiosity was piqued. And plus, I think they were trying to push an element of like, he had gotten older, possibly artificially older because of the medallion. And maybe he was thinking about like having an heir or a legacy, like somebody to leave all the things he's learned to. And, he doesn't have his own kid. So here's someone with the same powers, and that's as close as he's going to get.
I can see that, and Frost could go either way, but I would almost prefer her to be aligned with the good side of the story, because I think we've seen everything we need to see in regards to the conniving, twisted, resentful Frost. I think I've had my fill of that. But I don't know. I mean, going back to Sub-Zero, now that his brother's dead, he's probably trying to find that, relatable voice, someone who understands, what it's like to be a cryomancer and can relate to that. And I would hope Sub-Zero picked up on the fact that Frost had problems before he recruited her. I hope that was obvious somewhere in the process. He didn't just find out at the end of Deadly Alliance, I think that'd be
I think that he probably saw it coming. They did say that he forgave her for what he did after he just put her there and went off. It's like, you're young. I get it.
I think the idea with Frost and Deadly Alliance was that she turned bad because Sub-Zero was too soft. Because, like, Kuai Liang at that point in the story was almost Liu Kang-esque in his good guyness.
Yeah.
Like, he was very, just forgiving and seeing the best in her, and he's like, I know she's not learning to be humble, but hopefully she'll catch on and get it. I'm trying here, but, he was too soft with her, so that's why she turned on him. Because, like, she thought he was weak and vulnerable and she could get away with it. If her trainer was Bihan, he's probably a pretty harsh guy.
Yeah.
She might even, like, fear him.
Actually, that's what I was going to suggest when it came to me. I think that under Bihan's tutelage, she'd actually probably learn to respect and fear him, and that actually lead to her maybe leaving the clan entirely or fleeing at some point. I couldn't see the Lin Kuei under Bihan being someplace where, like, she'd stick around. So it's true.
Well, Bihan's most famous line is literally, fear me. So, yeah, I guess that does fit in with the character, but I don't know. I mean, I'm warming up to the idea of Bihan coming back. I love Kuai Liang. That would be very depressing for me, but at least I'm seeing the potential now as opposed to when the idea was first conceived.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard the Bihan hype train. We're happy to have you.
I don't know that I'd call it the hype train just yet.
All right,
Shadowloo,
do you have any more thoughts on that?
In addition to what I mentioned before about it being very possible that she could actually, kind of flee the Lin Kuei, insofar as the way that they like to play events coming out of MK9 is kind of having the opposite effect, aka Smoke and Sub-Zero, I can actually see the entry point for Frost, I would agree, would probably be the Cyber Initiative. Except that this time, rather than actually, there being a tournament or something, or like tryouts or auditions, I could actually see Bihan maybe coming across Frost, like, while returning to the Lin Kuei HQ to clean house and take care of Sector and everyone. He could, like, come across her defending herself from these cybernetic goons and say, you're doing pretty well. Would you be interested in helping me take these guys out? That's how I could see Frost coming in. Kind of a mirror way to the way that she originally was introduced. There we go. That's all.
Any closing thoughts, or are we ready to wrap this up?
That's all I got.
Okay. All right, cool.
I think we covered things pretty well.
Cool.
I like the fatality.
Yeah. All right, well, wrapping up this week's episode number 5. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. There's our channel and there's MKO's channel, so subscribe to both because both offer different things. And we're also on iTunes if you want to listen to us on the go. Check out Ice Baby's thread on MKO in the MKX section for a daily question leading into MKX, which is always fun. Kind of picks your brain a bit. Other than that, that's going to do it for this week's episode. So see you guys next week.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.
Stay cool.
Have a nice day.
Snow. Oh, wait. Damn it.
Fatality.